Erev Tov, good evening from Jerusalem, Israel. This is Lowell Joseph Gallen, founder of the Root and Branch Association Limited, established in 1981 in New York State. I would like to welcome our viewers and listeners worldwide and our live studio Zoom audience to this evening's program in our Root and Branch Association Limited English Language Conference and Lecture Series, broadcasting from Jerusalem, Israel. And now celebrating our first quarter century, first 25 years, from January 1995 until 2020 today. Actually, in 2 weeks, we'll be beginning the second quarter century with January 2021. But we didn't get there yet. Today is Wednesday, December 23rd, 2020 in the Gregorian calendar, and let me check, the 9th day of Tevet, 5781 in the Israelite Hebrew calendar. We are broadcasting from the land of Israel, city of God, Jerusalem. Our speaker for this evening's program is old friend, Professor Gerald Schroeder, who will speak about asking the hardest Bible science questions and many answers, with no bending of Bible or science. And now I would like to introduce and welcome our program chair, Dr. Les Glassman, who will introduce Professor.
Okay. Lowell, thank you very much. And it's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Professor Gerald Schroeder. So, Prof, you've had a very illustrious career, and I'm just going to give a short bio of your phenomenal achievements, and that our viewers will actually they'll know who they're going to be listening to this evening. So, Gerald Schroeder is an Orthodox Jewish physicist, an author, lecturer, and teacher at the College of Jewish Studies in Asia Torah's Discovery Seminar, Essentials and Fellowship Programs, and Executive Learning Center, who focuses on what he perceives to be an inherent relationship between science and spirituality. With regard to your education, Prof. Gerald Schroeder received his BSc in 1959, his MSc in 61, and his PhD in nuclear physics and earth and planetary science in 1965 from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He worked 7 years on the staff of MIT Physics Department, and he was a member of the United States Atomic Energy Commission. When Gerald made Aliyah in 1971, he was employed as a researcher at the Weizmann Institute of Science, the Volcani Research Institute, and the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and currently they're teaching at Asia Torah College of Jewish Studies. With regard to your religious views and your scientific theories, your works frequently cite Talmudic, Midrashic, and medieval commentaries on the Bible's creation accounts, such as commentaries written by a very famous Jewish philosopher, Nachmanides, the Ramban. Among other things, you attempt to reconcile the six-day creation as described in Genesis, Bereshit, with the scientific evidence that the world is billions of years old, using the idea perceived flow of time for a given event in expanding universe varies with the observer's perspective of that event. And you reconcile the two perspectives numerically, calculating the effect of stretching of time, of space-time based on Albert Einstein's general relativity. And this is actually very interesting that Anthony Flew, an academic philosopher who promoted atheism for most of his adult life, indicated that the arguments of Gerald Schroeder had influenced his decision to believe in God. And on a personal level, it's been always a privilege to listen to you and to see you at many different events, whether it be at the Israel Center and Asia Torah and many different Yabone and different forums where you've spoken. But you are married to Barbara Sofa, who is a very popular columnist for the English language Israeli newspaper. She's also editor and author, and she works in the Jerusalem Post. And you and Barbara have 5 children, and Baruch Hashem, many grandchildren. So it is a tremendous honor. And before I just introduce you, I just want to mention the amazing works that you've done, the books that you produced, and I have many of them. The Genesis and the Big Bang, Science of God, Conventions of Science and Biblical Wisdom, The Hidden Face of God, Science Reveals the Ultimate Truth, and God According to God, a physicist proves that we've been wrong about God all along. And tonight, you're going to prove to us that you are right, and your perception is, it really is something very, very special. So without any further ado, esteemed guest, Prof. Gerald Schroeder.
Thank you. I can see it. It's good to be here, but what that means is hard to know. I mean, it's good to be where I am right now, happy to be in my home, and it's good to be here virtually. Well, actually, one of the wonderful things when Barbara and I take, it's like an admission when we take a few courses that we start, Bible courses and other things on Zoom. And one of the nice things of having it scheduled in about this hour or hour earlier general time is you can eat dinner. You just take, mute your video and mute your sound and have dinner while you're listening to a great lecture. So it's if any of you are doing that right now, I hope you're enjoying whatever you're eating. And in any event, there are a series of questions that seem to come up when persons who have either small science background or a lot of science background, but are interested in the science of the universe and in the theology of the Bible. And the questions that arise often, how can the Bible say A when, as everyone knows, science says B? And in almost all of the cases, if you look at the questions and the questioner, you'll find out that it's usually that this conflict, this seeming conflict between the Torah and the Teva, nature, science, is that the person seen the conflict either knows a lot of Torah, a lot of Bible, but not much science, or a lot of science and not much Bible. And it pains me. My back, as I said, many years at MIT and in Cambridge, and just up the Charles River from MIT was Harvard. I don't want to mention the person's name because he's deceased for about 5 or 6, no, closer to 10 years now. But he was one of the world's leading paleontologists, a person who literally loved the Bible as literature, but realized that it couldn't be true. And he proved that it couldn't be true. No, I mentioned his gender, so I'm sorry to Devin. So I'm not going to mention his name. Usually I do, but I have no idea the audience tonight, so I don't want to offend anyone. I never want to offend anyone, but tonight I'd like, if I'm offending someone, I'd like to know if I'm the person I'm offending. Since I'm not sure who will listen to this, I won't know who I'm offending, so I'm not going to mention his name. In any event, world-class paleontologist proved in his field of paleontology that the Bible had a huge mistake and therefore could not be written by God. Now, the problem with this person's understanding of the Bible's huge mistakes, he didn't know Hebrew. He was criticizing a text that he couldn't read in the original. And so he could only believe that the persons who made whatever translation he was looking at were correct. The mistake he made was a mistake that Newton didn't make. Isaac Newton loved the Bible, but he didn't speak Hebrew. But he was wise enough to know, if you look at at least the last time I looked, like 10 years ago, Newton still had a website. It sounds strange, but and if you read his history, at his death, he had between 5 and 10 translations of the Hebrew into languages that he knew. 5 and 10 different translators worked on the Hebrew. And so when he saw that they all didn't match, well, he probably realized that none of them were correct. Because if one was correct, the others would have jumped on the correct translation also. The difficulty in this particular paleontologist didn't know, and he proved in his understanding by reading the English translation. I don't have it right in front of me, I'll do it from memory. In the opening chapter of Genesis, in fact, I will just walk around and read it directly from a translation. You can still hear me, I'm sure. This is the Hertz. I really have a passion for this particular translation, Joseph Hertz. It's written, and the commentary was done in the late 1930s, so it was just before the disasters of World War II. So it's interesting to see how commentaries can be so perceptive in the future. So here was the problem that this person found, and in his translation, he was exactly correct. It had to do with day 5, the animals that are mentioned on day number 5 in the 6 days of Genesis. And this is the beginning of the 5th day. Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. And this one says, and fowl that fly above the firmament of the earth. Okay, and the sea monsters. And the other translation, that the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, which is interesting. It's the first mention of animals in the Bible. And the description is that the waters swarming animals. That's day number 5. It matches when we do the age of the universe, and we'll get into that today. You can find on my website these numbers day by day and the calculation, how we get to them. It matches exactly what's called evolution's Big Bang, the Time magazine from decades ago, the Cambrian explosion of life. And notice where animal life starts, in the waters. And it's an explosion, the Big Bang of animal evolution. Scientific American has almost the identical headline. I'm not going to pull it out, but behind this cover is that. Notice that actually I have one of those, that trilobite that you see there on the right side. The person gave to me after he said I changed his life. He said he was a religious man, but he could never understand Genesis. In any event, explosion, and when we go through the ages of the water, that timing of day number 5 matches exactly that time, the timing of the Cambrian explosion of life, evolution's Big Bang. And then it says, as I read, water swarm, yes, and then the winged fowl that fly above the earth, or the birds. And now a paleontologist would know that this is a mistake, because birds or fowl, if you want to call them birds, don't appear on the animals that are mentioned on day number 5. They appear among the animals on day number 6, chronologically in the fossil record. And that's what this man's field was. I mean, if I quote, talk about like the new vaccine, it's mRNA, what is it even? The RNA and the mRNA, and I've read the books, and I know how the messenger RNA is made from the regular RNA, but it's not my field. I'm just parroting back things that I've learned in the text and assume they're correct. But when this person criticized the Bible, it was his field. He wasn't quoting someone else. He saw that the Bible said that birds appear among the animals on day 5, and anyone in paleontology knows very well, birds don't appear until the types of animals that are mentioned on day 6. So God couldn't have written the Bible. So clearly the Bible couldn't be divine. Of course, the mistake wasn't in the Bible. The mistake was he had the chutzpah to criticize the Bible, which he couldn't even read. It'd be like reading Shakespeare in Hebrew. It does do something in translation, because the text is spot on correct. Because the word that is used there in the Hebrew is oaf. Oaf, in modern Hebrew, oaf is you go to a restaurant, you get a half a chicken. Oaf means chicken, but that's not biblical Hebrew. That's modern Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew is oaf is any animal that flies. From the word oaf, it's such an ancient language that you can hear it. You can hear the word oaf, like flight. In fact, a very nasty comment to a person that you don't want around, he says, oof mekan, fly away from here, which is really not a nice thing to say, so I don't recommend saying it to anyone, but that is a nasty expression. Oof. Oof means animals that fly. And guess what? Nature invents flight on day 5. Because if you just think for yourself, now I don't expect to get answers to this, but you're all muted, so I'm sorry that you are, but think what you're thinking about. What were the earliest animals that fly? Well, you know, the pterodactyl, and think we're basically, would the earliest animals that fly be big animals or little animals? Well, they'd probably be little animals. Well, what are the littlest animals that fly? Bugs. An insect flight is invented very shortly after insects, and they are day 5 animals. And the waters are just magnificent, because the earliest of flights that are maybe the stonefly, which has an aqueous part of its history, the Torah got it exactly right. And what's beautiful about this person saying that it's wrong is that if a person were writing this, they would have stuck, as this man pointed out, a flight on day number 6. And that would have meant for sure, but God didn't write the Bible, because flight appears among animals on day 5, and it's insects. And if you want to see an insect that flies, if you want to see, a water insect that flies, because flight originates with a water insect that flies, I urge you, when the waters get a bit warmer, you come to Israel, go to a fish pond, and maybe you can do that in the catfish ponds in the south, but don't eat the catfish, they're not kosher, and snorkel, and some goggles, and you dive down to the bottom of the water. If the fish here, the tilapia and the carp, not going to bite you. And if you look around long enough, you're going to see a bunch of worms crawling on the bottom, because the fish like to eat them because it's protein and they're worms. But some of them survive. And if you're fortunate enough, what you're going to see is one of these worms eventually, as they get mature, they look like a tube. A tube maybe 2 or 3 millimeters, maybe a few millimeters in length, and maybe a millimeter in diameter. All they have is a mouth and an anus, no flapping wings or whatever you might call fins or anything, just a tube. And then watch what happens if you're fortunate enough to watch it. It's amazing to watch. At one point in their development, they start squiggling like this. And you know, people can swim without using their arm. Like one of my daughters can do that, where they just move your body. Good. The Olympic swimmers, one of my daughters can do it. They're not Olympic swimmers. Olympic swimmers always do. And they work their way to the surface. Now they're heavier than water. That's where they're on the bottom of the pond. Then have to force their way by swimming up to the top. But you know, there's something heavier than water, more dense than water, can rest on the top by surface tension. The water's interface between water and air, so you have this surface tension, and they stay there on top. They only do this in the evening, only in the evening, and then they unzip, and out flies the chironomid fly. Those are called chironomids. The chironomid lives its life as a worm, a tiny, almost spaghetti-like but short worm, comes to the surface, and in the evening forms a canoe, and how it flies to fly. Why in the evening? The birds don't see them. I guess over time, the ones that did it in the day didn't have much offspring because they probably got eaten by birds. So flight is invented. So it's crucial when you're thinking about criticizing the Bible, make sure you know Hebrew. Or if you don't know Hebrew, get at least 5 different translations. And if you see they differ among themselves, then you still don't know the Hebrew, because if one were correct, you wouldn't have the other 5. Okay, so that's just an example of being careful of understanding when you see conflict, because there was an example of a brilliant knowing science brilliantly, but not knowing the Bible. And consistently you go over these questions time and again. I know a lot of this Bible, but not much science, and not much Bible. We were at dinner with my wife, and I was at dinner, Barbara, and I were at dinner with a family, and a woman said, well, science questions never bothered me. And I asked her, she didn't have a science background. I said, that's music to my ear. If you don't have a science background, clearly the science questions are not going to bother you, and that should be exactly your reaction. The problem is the reaction of persons that don't know a lot of science, and still they're willing to say the Bible can't be right scientifically, or the science can't be right. Dinosaurs, we ever heard of dinosaur? In other words, that kind of stupidity here regularly. Unfortunately, less and less now as more and more information comes into the sphere of the general public. So that didn't get us far, but it did show how to be careful in this. And that just, by the way, and that proof that the Bible was wrong appeared in newspapers and in one of it, at least one of his published books. That means thousands and thousands of people have read the fact that the Bible is wrong. Proven wrong by a person that did not know. Now he knows Hebrew, I'm sure, way up there in heaven. But he made the correction, he didn't. One of the questions really worth asking, I think, in the Bible is, why does the Bible give us certain forms of information? Because if a lot of this information weren't present, you know what? We wouldn't have the hardest questions ever were asked. For instance, why does the Bible tell me that after Adam and Eve have their first two kids, Adam, Cain and Abel, and Cain murders Abel, Abel's out of the picture, that's in chapter 4, we hear in chapter 4 the progeny and the amazing thing that Cain's family did, because they've already gotten the rivalry out of the way by killing Abel. But Cain has what Cain's progeny do, how building cities and almost the Bronze Age. Tubal Cain, the son of Lamech, does the working of sophisticated bronze. These things go through. Then you come to chapter 5. The very end of chapter 4 says, and then Adam and Eve had their third kid named Seth. Okay, and then in chapter 5 we start Seth over again, and we're told that Adam and Eve live 130 years and have a kid named Seth. And then a few more words, and then Seth lives 105 years, a kid named Enosh. And Enosh says, why does the Bible burden us with the information that Adam and Eve wait 130 years before they have their third kid? Seth 105 years before he can say, who cares how long they let him wait till the cows come? Why do I have to know? Well, clearly, if indeed, as I hold by the case, that the Bible is the word of God, then that information is there for a reason. And that reason is to develop a calendar. Now, if we didn't develop the calendar, guess what? We would never have a question of how long ago dinosaurs were and when the world became a big, and is it 624 hours? Because if there's no calendar, no one's being arguing. We just take it for granted. But now the Bible wants a calendar, and we know it wants a calendar. You know why? Because in Cain's progeny, in chapter 4, all the details are given, except one. Ages. There is not a single age given for Cain's progeny. Now, why is that interesting? It's interesting because if any ages were given for Cain's progeny, they would be superfluous, because Cain's progeny end somewhere towards the end of chapter 4. So if the Bible were giving us ages for them, that would be superfluous information. And guess what? The Bible doesn't have superfluous information. It's all relevant. But now you come to Seth, and it is through Seth's line that we get to Noah and the other, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all. The line flow that we read in the Torah continues through Seth. So Seth's ages, and every year following, from the beginning of Adam to Seth, etc., you can add them up. There is no wiggle room. All the data are given right up to Joseph becoming sold as a slave into Egypt, and then Joseph's family, Jacob and his siblings as a family, right up to their coming in Egypt. There is no wiggle room whatsoever. One of the interesting things that has no wiggle room, and I included this in one of my books. It's a well-known fact. I mean, I didn't discover it, obviously. Actually, Barbara warned me, don't put that in there, that people will think that Abraham, when you add up the ages, we discover with no slack, there's no plus or minus 1 or 2, that Abraham is born in the year, guess what? Talmud says 52 years before the year 2000 of the biblical calendar. Abraham is, and that's what the Talmud says, but you can add up the generations also, you get the same number, 1948. It's just such an interesting coincidence that the father of Judaism, Abraham, is born in the biblical calendar of 1948, and the state of Israel, in our time, born in the Gregorian calendar in the year 1948. The two numbers overlap. Is it a chance? It might be. It might be just a simple nuance. I know. I would not use that. What goes in a smachta. I wouldn't hang my belief that the Bible is the Word of God on the fact that 1948 in Gregorian and 1948 in the biblical calendar match. But it's an an interesting nuance. So those years let us add up, and we add, come to the end of the Hebrew Bible. We then add the kings and the queens and the presidents and whatever, and we get to a year. It's less than 6,000 years. You add everything up in the Bible, then you come to the Bible, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible ends, and you can add on. We know the histories from the kings, when they, etc. And you get to a number that's less than 6,000 years. At the moment, I think it's 5781. And science comes, and that's how we get that number, by adding the ages. And science gets a number of a bit less than 14 billion years. And just to put this, just to tie it together, I don't want to go into the age of the universe at the moment, but we get that number. My background's not cosmology, it's nuclear physics, earth sciences. We had some of this in the earth sciences, but we get that number by wonderful nuance in the creation of the world, is that everything in this world, you included, has a wave property, wave, and a particle a wave-particle duality. It's a duality. The universe is dualistic, like mind-brain duality, wave-particle. Particle is like this. It's got discrete edges. A wave has no edges. It just goes forever. And the wave aspect of light, which also has a wave-particle aspect, Einstein gets his Nobel Prize for demonstrating or interpreting data that existed, demonstrating that the light is also a particle. He didn't get the Nobel Prize for the laws of relativity. He gets the Nobel Prize for showing the particle aspect, the particle aspect of light, because it knocks out electrons. Einstein's discovery is what keeps the elevator door from shutting on your foot when it knows your foot is there. Okay. But what happens is we take, with large telescopes, we see light coming in from deep space. We don't go out to space, the light comes to us. And by work of Edward Hubble and Henrietta Leavitt, and if you have not known the name Henrietta Leavitt, look it up. It's Leavitt with 2 T's, okay? All of his work is based on her discoveries. Hubble had actually put her up, nominated her for a Nobel Prize, but she died of cancer before she was, or otherwise she would know her as a Nobel laureate. Anyway, her work with his allows the scientific community, I'll say us, to measure how far galaxies are away from us. And then we measure the light coming from those galaxies and discover that the further the galaxy is from us, the more the light wave has been stretched. Oh, what does that mean? Well, to save about 5 paragraphs of discussion, it means that space is stretching and the galaxies are moving away from us as the space stretching. And when those light beams come to us through space, they literally, as if, swim through the space is stretching, so the wavelength gets stretched out. And the further the galaxy is from us, the longer it takes to get here, the more the stretching. So when you plot those distances and the amount of stretching, and then you say, well, how much time would it take to unstretch those waves? And in each case, it comes out to be a bit less than 14 billion years. So that's how the 14 billion years is derived from looking at the stretching of light as it comes to us from deep space. Okay, and that gives us billions of years, and the science gives us thousands. But had there not been a calendar, had it not bothered to tell us that Cain and Adam and Eve waited 130 years to have their third kid, Seth, and Seth 100, et cetera, for all the, if the Torah hadn't given us that information, it'd be no problem. So clearly the Torah wants us to develop a calendar, to break our heads against the fact is, why are there dinosaurs and this and that and the other thing? And the fact that it has that information means that there must be a scientifically proper and understandable way of reconciling 6 24-hour days, and with billions of years. And the commentaries that say the days weren't days, they were long periods of time, are lovely, bending the Bible. But that's the problem. Bending the Bible is a loser. My suggestion is, if all you have to do is to bend the Bible, I suggest ham and eggs on Yom Kippur. That's how you have to get to make the Bible work, because it wouldn't be worth any more than ham and eggs on Yom Kippur, God forbid. But you don't have to bend the Bible. The text says, Nachmanides, Rashi, the year 1090, before anyone was thinking about dinosaurs, 1090 in the section of Talmud called Hagiga. The Talmud is written down about 1600 years ago. Wait, and Rashi's in the year 1090, okay? And he says explicitly, why he says it, I don't know, but he says the word day in Genesis chapter 1, Yom, Kaf Dalet She'od, day, 24 hours. It's the easiest commentary in all of biblical commentary. Day means 24 hours. And the Nachmanides in the year about 1250 expands on Rashi. Remember, Rashi's about 1090, he's 1250, so there's a space there. Nachmanides, who obviously knew the Rashi, he goes further and he says, not only 6 24-hour days, but Kamosh Sheshet Yamei Avodah, like the 6 days of a work. Because, and it's interesting, he says, because one of my students said, well, okay, there's 6 24-hour days, but maybe the hours are different. But Nachmanides, the major Kabbalistic comment, and Kabbalah is not mysticism, get that out of your head. It's totally based on the Torah. It says that the major Kabbalistic commentary on the Torah says explicitly, not only 6 24-hour days, like the 6 days of a work week. So you can't say the hours are different. There are 6 24-hour days from the creation up to the end of chapter 1, and 5.5 days till you get to Adam, because he's halfway through the 6th day. So you have 5 days and half of the 6th day, 5.5 days, and you have 14 billion years, and they both match. And it comes out to be 2 perspectives of one reality. Not cheating, not bending, totally. It's not even relativity. It's not even cosmology, it's astronomy. Simple astronomy, which every astronomer knows. What the amazing thing is that the numbers work. We get that into it maybe later if we have time. But I just want to mention a few other cases now where the information seems superfluous. And I would like to see if anyone, I don't know how I can do this, but if anyone has ever, like raise your hand or something. I can't see you, but maybe other people can. If you've ever thought of these things, for instance, we have the age. That's why the Bible tells us ages. It wants a calendar. What about Jacob? Okay, so Jacob is running away from his brother because Jacob did something that is problematic. But he's running away, and he goes to spend some time with his Laban, and he marries 2 of the daughters, and then they have children. He's there for 14 years, and then he says 7 years for one daughter, Leah, 7 years for Rachel, although he gets Rachel after he gets both daughters after the first 7 years. Okay, a little bit trickery in there. You'll see it in the Bible. It's all in Genesis. And then Jacob says, but I got to make some money for myself. So I'm going to raise, let's do this. You take out of he was a shepherd for Laban, his father-in-law. He says to his father-in-law, take away all the spotted sheep and all the black spotted goats. Just leave me the pure white and pure white, okay? And from now on, only the animals that are born spotted will be mine. That seems like a losing situation because he's only got white animals now to breed. All the spotted ones, his father-in-law has taken far away. So Jacob only has white animals here, but he knows they're dominant recessive traits. And he's been handling these animals for 14 years. So he knows that sometimes a white sheep can get, white is dominant, the dominant color, can give spotted sheep, because he realized that somehow that was the work for Mendel, much more, 3,000 years later, that there are these different traits that are held within them. And he knew that. And he realized that certain types, just jumping quickly to the chase, he realized that certain animals are more likely to have hidden within the white, I'm going to use our terminology, dominant is the recessive spotted. So if you cross pure white, 2 pure whites with a white and a recessive, you're going to get maybe 20 or so percent or 25% spotted animals. And if it's reset, and if you cross a male that has the recessive and the dominant, and the female has the recessive and dominant, you can get up to half spotted animals. Oh, that's pretty tricky. Now you got to get them to mate. So what does Yaakov? What does Yaakov is the Hebrew word for Jacob? It's my name. Also, keep it to English if I remember. What does Jacob do? He takes some sticks and he peels them and he puts them in. It's interesting. Rashi missed this. It's interesting. Rashi, was a major commentator with straight shot, missed this. He peels them. Now, any tree that you peel the bark off of, you put a strip and then leave, strip and then leave, you're going to get light, because underneath the bark, it's always lighter, and the bark is usually darker, so you can get light, dark, light, dark, dark. And he wants the animals to become light and dark, spotted. That's what it would seem like to be. That would be Lamarckian. That's not what happens. Because the Bible gives us a piece of information which is totally irrelevant, except that it's not, because there is no irrelevant data in the Bible. What does the Bible tell us about those sticks? Does anyone remember? If you do, clap your hands, raise your hands, jump up and down. It tells you the names of the trees. Do I really care what kind of trees Jacob uses to stick in? I mean, why would the Bible tell us the names of the trees? Oh, because when you go to the literature and you look up the nature of the sap of at least one of those trees, and maybe of all of them, I don't even trying to fool. Guess what the nature of the sap is? Remember, and it's explicit. He doesn't just stick the sticks near where they eat drinking water. He sticks the sticks in the water that they're drinking. So they drink from the sap that comes out of those sticks. Oh, interesting. Very interesting when you find out that at least one of those sticks sap is an aphrodisiac. Interesting, huh? Never thought of that, did you? I didn't either. One of my colleagues in Brazil said, let's look up the nature of those sticks. Why does God tell us the names of those sticks? So all the people out there who have known, presumably a couple of rabbis, maybe also that never bothered to look it up as well, or Rebbitzins, look it up now, and then start thinking about everything else that's relevant. And we know that Jacob and the people of the time knew about aphrodisiacs, maybe not that name, but love potions. How do we know that? Because the previous chapter, essentially a throwaway chapter, tells us what? That Reuben, the firstborn, Reuben of the tribe, comes back to the field with what's translated as mandrakes. And there's a big argument between Leah and Rachel, the two wives, over who's going to get the mandrakes so they can have relations with Jacob when he comes in from the field. See, they knew that the mandrakes were also love potions as well, aphrodisiacs. So they know. We are learned by that chapter, which was almost an essential chapter, but nothing's unessential. We know from that chapter that the people at that time understood love potions. And now we jump to the sticks and we discover that one of the sticks has a sap that is a love potion. And it makes all the sense why the Bible told us the names of the sticks. What about the animals that we come out of Egypt, like all human beings? It's worthy for me lately. I mean, God has the plagues. God splits the sea. God gives us manna. But what have you done for me lately? I want some meat, baby. I want some meat. So God says, I'm going to give you meat. Now, that's very interesting because, as you all know, there's even a song on Shabbos that we sing about one of those kinds of meat. Right? Slav, Vidagim, Slav, quail. Why does the Torah bother telling us that the animals that they're going to get to eat are quail? We know that we're in the bird watching center, one of the bird watching centers of the world, one of the main ones, because Israel forms the link between Europe, the land bridge between Europe and Africa. So comes winter in Europe, and the birds, like people go to Florida in the United States to get away from the snow. I think they call them snowbirds or something. Flirting. Anyway, the birds of Europe, millions, hundreds of millions fly over Israel in the beginning of the winter to get down to the warm climate of, they must have read the news about it. Somehow they know that the days are getting shorter and it's going to be getting colder. And they go for the solstice, it's really going to get cold. In any event, so they go down. That's in the fall. And in the spring, guess what's happened? The spring, they start coming right back up, right? Because this comes the spring In Europe, you know, the early months, like the time, let's say, of Passover, let's say the Exodus, what happens? The animals are now coming from Africa, which is getting chilly, and heading up to Europe, which is getting warmer. And it all happens just at the time. Gosh, isn't that a coincidence? Happens just at the time of Passover. Now that's really interesting. And then the Torah says the people want meat, and God says, I'll give you meat. Not I'll give you meat. So Moses says something like, to harvest all the fish in the sea won't be enough. And God says, is my hand ever waxed short? And then we discover that God isn't harvesting the fish in the sea. God makes it easier for them. God just brings quails, and there was an article in the New York Times, the quails have returned to Alexandria. I have it somewhere in my notes, because every spring the birds fly, they're exhausted from the flight up. They land in Israel at some places, and then they rest, and then they keep on going. And the Bedouins to this day catch them by putting up nets in the air, like fishermen put nets in the water. Bedouins in the southern part of it put up nets. This quail fly into the net, and they catch them. But there's a difficulty. With the quail is that they're poisonous. Oh, gee, didn't think of that, did you? Interesting. In fact, they're so poisonous that if you look up quail on Google, you just write quail toxin. The poison of quail is so specific, it has its own name. And if you look at it, it's very interesting. If you look at, you get a whole list of references, scroll down till you get the one that's translated from the Latin, where we learn that the soldiers of the Foreign Legion, the Roman Foreign Legion, were forbidden to eat quail because it was killing the soldiers. But wait a minute, the Bedouins eat quail. Yeah, exactly what here in the text. The Bedouins eat quail because what they know is you catch the quail, you kill them, you put them aside for a day or two, and then you eat them. The poison degrades. Now, guess what? Look at the text where we deal with the quail. Let me see. I have a note down here for my class. A year ago I could read this without my notes. It's in Numbers, book of Numbers, from maybe chapter 11, verse 31, and the sheep thing was Genesis chapter 30, verse 37. The comes of sheep. But in any event, what we discover when you look at the text there in Numbers, what you just see, I've lost everyone here. I seem to have lost everyone. Am I still on, or have I been turned off?
Jerry, yeah,
Jerry, you're still on.
Yes,
it's going very well.
Still there.
Wait, just speak. One person speak. Am I still on?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, because all I see now is Zoom. I don't see anything else but the word Zoom.
No, you're still on, and you're doing amazing.
Okay. So what you discover is exactly what the text tells us. The people died with the flesh in their mouth. They were still chewing. Those that grabbed the animals and ate them, maybe cooked them, ate them right away, that killed them. But you'll notice the piece of irrelevant information. There were so many quail that there were piles that were days' journey. It's amazing. The text, God, that was a day's journey from the camp. That's how it was. And the guys and gals that ate from that pile that was a day's journey, guess what? They didn't die. Everyone was eating quail, so why didn't everybody die? It was the guys and gals that were a little more patient and went out and took the quail that were dead for a day's journey. That's how far the piles were away from them. They didn't die. And it's exactly what the Bedouins know today. They kill the quail, they wait a day, and then you can eat it. And it was just, in other words, the text tells you quail. Who needs to know quail? Well, I'll tell you why you need to know quail. Just look up quail, Slavic, Hebrew. About 10, not Bible stuff, skip the Bible books. They might be prejudiced. They don't have to be, they might be. Take the pure ones like the Journal of the American Medical Society discusses in detail the nature of the poison that's in quail. Okay, guess what? The Journal of the American Medical Society is not interested in proving the Bible, but is proving the fact, and it doesn't mention the quail of the Bible, it just mentions quail. Who needs quail? Give me a big bird, quail. But that's where the text tells us about quail. So there's piles and piles of these subtleties that are put in that you discover suddenly they have all the reason for the basis of it. I'm just wondering if I should get to there's one aspect which is, well, and many things. Look, Adam is put into the Garden of Eden to tend it and to guard it. Who needs to guard the Garden of Eden? It's you know, it's like again, I'm beholden to one of my colleagues from Brazil for that. And you know, it's the Garden of Eden. Now, what could be bad? But then why does Adam have to guard it? Well, we see why. Because the next thing you know, there's big problems taking place. There's a tree in that garden you're not supposed to eat from. And guess what? The Adam and Eve are seduced into eating from it. The guarding that Adam was supposed to do apparently didn't take place properly, because guess what? A serpent came in and God did what it wanted, whatever it wanted to do. It did it. I urge you also, another one, I'm just pointing these things out, these subtleties that are in the text, and point time and again, you see them. We learn in Numbers when the spies rebel in Number, and God says, I'm going to wipe them out, and Moses says it's not a good idea because the nations will say you were too weak to bring them into defeat the Canaanites to come in. And this is chapter 14. They're about, it's Numbers, and the next book is Deuteronomy, the fifth book. They're about to come into the land. They finally get right there. It's right before God says, okay, you got 40 years now in the desert for the 40 days that the spies said. But who dies after? So God says, okay, they're not going to die, but all those that are really guilty do die. And then if you compare the text, you discover that only those that are over 20 die in the desert. None of the women die, because we see from the text clearly that the women all wanted to go forward. Only the men over 20 die in the desert. Now, why over 20? And you can read the text and you see it's very clear. Why over 20? Because when information comes into your brain, gets to a way station called the thalamus, a part of your brain, and it bifurcates. It's sent in two directions. It's sent into the amygdala, where it says fight or flight, you know, save me, I'm going to run away, I'm going to beat you up. And it goes also to your frontal, this magnificent frontal cortex that you have, which is the logic, and it gets you and says, well, you know, you really want to hit him in the face, but he pumps free weights of 350 pounds. It's not a good idea. And he's 6'5", and you're only 5'5". So maybe that's the battle between your amygdala, punch him in the nose, and your frontal cortex. Use some logic. And that connection between a punch him in the nose or run away or fight and the logic is only connected after the late teens, early 20s. So what happens is before that time, if someone says, oh, let's run away, we can't beat the Canaanites, forgetting the fact that God has beaten this king and that king and that king, split the sea, etc. The strongest nation in the world was shot down, you know, Egypt. And so your fight and flight doesn't think about that. Let's run, and they say, let's go back to Egypt. But only the over 20 die. Look at the text, it's very clear. Why over 20? Because after 20, your connection between your fight and flight, I'll run and punch you, and your logic, well, I can do this, I can't do it, is connected. So even though the information goes to both of parts now, they can now debate. They now can debate which would happen, and the logic would say, well, let's see. God took Egypt, God fed us with manna, God split the sea, God let us destroy this, the Og and this king and that king. I think God will take care of us now. But that information didn't get to be the logic was still there, but the fight or flight of the people under 20 took over, because that gets the information first. So the text tells us that only over 20 are you liable. The idea of 13 is rabbinic, and probably because so many people were dying before they were 20. The idea of 13 is totally rabbinic. It's the Torah makes 20 for the obligation, the Raisa. Well, the rabbis may expect that also. The Raisa, it's from age 20. So, and that you can see these days. Chapter 14, verse 20. I have a note here just for the idea where you can. It's one of the sources, and you can search out from there. That the age 20 is the breakup, and it's also the age at which you go to war. Now in Israel, it's 18, but 20, because 20 becomes socially unmanageable. But biblically, the break comes at 20. So there are I mean, I've been talking away for almost an hour, but the aspects that live within the text and want you to look at them. Look, God, at the end of chapter 1, and God saw all that he did, and it was a tough ma'od, takan machar, the Rashi says. It was a very tough ma'od. It's very good. Very good. A couple of chapters later, Cain murders Abel. 2 chapters after that, we have the flood. I mean, people before the flood were living to 900 years, never get hung up. Could they live? Couldn't they? You know, the fact is, maybe we've been punished for having short lives. Maybe 900 was normal. And we just say, oh, how could they live 9? Maybe the fact they were, oh, God, these people have progeria. Look, they're all dying at 100. It's 10 times too young, which is what progeria does. Okay, maybe 900 years was what it was supposed to be. But in any event, don't get hung up. The message of the flood and the change of lifespans. I can find the diagram somewhere. I'm still here. I'm just bending over looking for the diagram that shows the change, the very interesting change in lifespan from. Oh, here it is, right here. I don't know if this would be too shiny to see, but we should write that up. I can't tell if you're seeing because I don't have anything to see. If I click on this, I'll come back. No, I don't. So I don't see myself any longer. Can anyone tell me, are you seeing it?
Yeah, Prof, we're seeing it very well.
Okay, and what you'll notice is that this is before the flood. This is Adam. This is Noah. This is the flood, and then following the flood, this is Adam. This is Noah, and following the flood, lifespans gradually drop down, as if something changed in the environment and selected for, that's the modern term, selected for the shorter lifespans, okay? With the major information, look, this bar here is people are dying at like 100, 120, numbers we know today. Here they're dying at 920, like almost a factor of 9, it drops down, which is just like progeria, if it were progeria. In any event, that drops down. The major message right here is 900-year-old people were not a good idea. Really? So why do we ever have 900-year-old people? And it only took 10 generations, because there's only 10 generations from here to here. So if we only, well, why do we have 900-year-old people? Because that's the way that God runs the world. God gives the world slack. If you want to mess it up, God will let you mess it up. You want to start buying, you know, if in fact the virus did come from China, and we want to turn a blind eye that the people in China work for very low wages, but I worked in China a lot. In fact, I was, according to the Chinese, I don't know if it's true, the people I worked with, I was the first foreign advisor after the Cultural Revolution to come and work with them in the agri-tech and the petrochemicals, okay? They came to Israel. I'm an Israeli. For the next 10 years, there was no contact between China and Israel. And they said, Schroeder, you're coming here under the radar. You're an Israeli. We do not, to my face. This is my translator. I only learned about 5 words, or sang, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's about as much. And I learned the symbol for men's room. Very important piece of information. And anyway, they said, to my face, you're coming in here. You're under the radar. You're an Israeli, but you have knowledge that we want. And anyone, I mean, it was like I got letters in those days. They were actually paper letters, 1980s, from my colleagues, my science colleagues back in America. You lucky dog, how did you get this, etc. The Chinese couldn't come to me directly. They went to the United Nations and they said, bring Schroeder in. And that's when they told me, I was saying, I'm not bragging because it's just crazy. I'm sure there are other people. What they did like is the fact that I was a Jew and an Israeli. They figured that was a pretty unbeatable combination. As you see, the startup nation. Well, they could have had plenty of other people that knew what I do. But in any event, why did I say that? Because of some reason about the China, I have no remembrance. In any event, notice what was not a good idea? 900-year-old people. Because that's the way God runs the world. You want to to think about the virus. You want to I'm not going to get to the theology of the virus, so I don't want to put that spin on it. But we did like having cheap products from China at the expense of the Chinese working at low wage and at the expense of industry in the West suffering from not being able to match those prices. Okay, in any event. So if 900 years of people was a bad idea, why did God have it in the first place? Because God very often steps back, lets the world run. If you want to mess it up, God will let you mess it up. And that's what happened right here. So even though the text says it was Tov Ma'od, very good, it wasn't so very good. Okay, I got off the track, but anyway, we know that we measure the ages by the way of the universe by the wavelengths. For the science, 14 billion years, Bill with 90 billion with 9 zeros, American billion, and the 624-hour days. But there are two views of time. I'm not going to get into the actual calculations, etc., because you can just go to my website, geraldschroeder.com, and there is an essay there which leads you by the hand called The Age of the Universe. So you can go to aish.com, and there's a few. You want to go to the most recent one because there's more and more data. Not the numbers haven't changed, but the amount of data that back it up have changed. The Age of the Universe. So you can just go to the web and look up Age of the Universe. Anyway, so we have these two views. So how is it to have the chutzpah to be able to have two views? Because Nachmanides points it out. It wasn't me. I'm the guy that was so, I don't know if you were blessed, but blessing isn't like, oh boy, I'm blessed. Blessing means you got it. You didn't deserve it in the first place, but you got it. So I was just the guy that knew science, enough science in his Bible to put it together. But the Ramban, Nachmanides, pointed it out. He asked the question, at the end of each day, the day is numbered, but why does the form of the number change? Vihi erev ivoka yom echad. Vihi evoka yom sheni, shlishi. Evening and morning, day one, or evening and morning, one day. Evening, morning, a second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, the sixth day. Why doesn't it say a first day? Why doesn't it say a first day? Because he says you couldn't write first because there wasn't yet a second day. Oh, interesting. I fought in the first Lebanese war. None of us fighting, and I said this before on when we talked about this in previous lecture, none of us fighting in the first Lebanese war, at least none of us that I knew, said, gee, we're fighting in the first Lebanese war. I didn't say it. My four buddies that didn't come back from the first Lebanese war say it. Well, why didn't I say I was fighting in the first Lebanese war during the first Lebanese war? When now I say I fought in the first Lebanese war. Because when I was fighting in the first Lebanese war, guess what? There wasn't yet a second Lebanese war. And hence it says the Lebanese war. Hence Ramban says day one because there wasn't a second day and you could not write a first day when there's no other second day. Oh, but God knew about the other. Don't put my head with the foolish rejoinder. Obviously God knew or didn't know. It's immaterial. The text says day one because the perspective is from a time before there was a second day. And this diagram, which you've probably all seen from other lectures that anyone give, this is NASA. Do you see this diagram? Is that diagram visible?
Yes, it is. It's visible. It is very good. We've seen it before. It's an amazing diagram.
This is straight from the web. This piece of paper is almost 10 years old. It hasn't changed one bit, except the age of the universe has been more accurately by about 5% improved. It's always a bit less than 14 billion years. This is the creation. The universe expands out. We are on this oval out here. This is us. There's these vertical lines. Every vertical line is a billion years. Every word on this text is right from NASA, National Space Authority. There's no Bible in this statement. It is a phenomenally important statement because look what it shows. First, there's a creation of the world. Our universe had a beginning. It wasn't eternal. Now you got a problem. Well, what creates the universe? Oh, it says it right here. Yeah, quantum fluctuations. Ed Tryon, who went to his grave never being acknowledged, but in 1973, he published in the journal Nature, one of the two most important science journals worldwide, that the universe is probably the result of a quantum fluctuation. And books that now are published, like The Universe from Nothing and others, refuse to mention his name. He is the source of this information. It's 50 years ago, almost 47 or so, a quantum fluctuation. And if you go to the web, and I urge you, Proof of God in 5 minutes. It's actually 5 minutes and 28 seconds. It's a video. It has way over, web-wise, it has close to 5 million views, but even on the parents' site before the hijacks, it has over 3 million views. That's with an M, 3 million views. And it just does one thing. It uses this diagram, and it is total science. Look what science says here about the creation of the universe, and think carefully. It says it is the result of a quantum fluctuation, namely the laws of nature. Now, would God use the laws of nature to create the universe? Well, first of all, if God creates the laws of nature, might as well use them. But does God ever use the laws of nature? What does God need the laws of nature for? Well, let's see. What's really one of the really big events in the Torah? How about splitting the sea? Exodus chapter 14, verse 21. God made a strong east wind blow all night. Sea splits. The Israelites go through. And guess who follows them right on in? The pursuing Egyptians. Because it's just the wind. How do we know they think it looks natural? Because only natural thing is happening. God shuts the wind off and the waters are coming back. And that's natural for the waters. At that point, they say, Ya Habibi, God is fighting for the Hebrews, the whatever Jews, the Hebrews. It's too late to find. Could a wind possibly? I mean, it's a joke. Could a wind possibly split the sea? It's so ridiculous statement, a wind splitting the sea. Yeah. So then, are there oceanographic explanations for the Israelites crossing the Red Sea? I really meant Red Sea. And guess what journal it isn't from? The local Bible? No. It's the most important meteorological journal worldwide. The Bulletin of the American Meteorological Society is the world's Aleph, A journal on meteorology. Nothing passes it. Nothing beats it for the meteorology. And they go through a study, and guess what? A 40-mile-an-hour wind out of the east will split the sea, or the computer study that passed in peer review here. So the wind could split the sea. So God could use the laws of nature, as God uses regularly the laws of nature because God created them. So God uses the laws of nature to create the world. What does that mean? Just listen to this, because this is the proof of God in 5 minutes that has millions and millions of views. The laws of nature are not physical. They act on the physical. So the laws of nature are not physical. They predate the universe because they're used to create the universe. The laws of nature are not physical. They predate the universe. That means they are outside of time. They predate the universe, so they predate time as we understand time. So they're not physical. They predate the universe. They're outside of time, and they can create a physical universe from absolutely nothing physical. See, the black here is nothing, not empty space. Space is something. Something that is not physical, outside of time, predates the universe, creates the universe from absolute nothing. That does sound pretty much like a description of God. One of the aspects of God in this world is God projecting the laws of nature. Obviously, God is way beyond the laws of nature, but God uses this aspect of God to create the universe. And that's exactly what NASA says. And what's so amazing, one of the three founders of NASA is none other than Robert Jastrow. And Robert Jastrow, decades and decades ago, when the Big Bang was just starting, had an article called "In the Beginning Was the Bang," a big one. And then he ends up the article. Thank goodness, I say thank God, literally. One of a person I don't know. I should mention his name. His last name is Sargent, Arthur Sargent. I'm not going to say where he lives. People who bother me, start bothering him. He sent me this and copied, and this reads like this: For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. As the scientist pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Robert Jastrow, one of the founding members of NASA and the Goddard Space Agency. Yeah, it all matches. And this description of the creation is a spot-on match. And that's what put that video on the map. proof of God in 5 minutes, and other places where it's been hijacked called a belief of God in 5 minutes. But I urge you, and it only takes, it's a lie actually, because it takes 5 minutes and 28 seconds, but it's worth. So how do we get this understanding now? Jumping back now from these, and then we'll end it. Nachmanides points out, the text says, day one. Now the first day was mentioned in fighting, that's the Chinese got off the track there. So the Torah sees time from the beginning looking forward. And it sees 6 24-hour days. We look back in time and we measure 14 billion years. Should that make a difference? And it makes all the difference in the world. Because if you are, from our point of view, if we are viewing things that took place way in the history, like the light beams are coming in from deeper and deeper and deeper space, Professor Peebles at Princeton has exactly the right answer for this. This stretching, it's called the redshift. The stretching measures exactly the changes in the perception of time. And when we measure the age of the universe as 14 billion years, if we wanted to project our understanding of 14 billion years to back towards the beginning, and there is a view looking this way and not that way, which is our view, we don't live in this view of 6 24 days. That's the Bible's view, totally the biblical point of view. As it says in Psalm, and we know there are these differences in views. Psalm 90, 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that passes, like a watch in the night. So there are 3 views of time, 1,000 years, a day that passes, a watch in the night. So we know that there are these different views of time. So Torah sees the time from, I guess, sort of the biblical view of time. I don't like to say God's view, but it's the Bible's view. It could be God's Bible view looking forward from the beginning. We look back, but now I want to take those 14 billion years and project them back. And as Peebles points out, and every other astronomer points out also, if you knew this ratio between here and here, you would know how much the universe is stretched from here to here, and you would know, therefore, how much you have to compress it. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but you go to my website and you'll find any of the websites, the easiest, or any of the places you find The Age of the Universe by Gerald, Schroeder, and you will know that there's a 900 billion ratio here. It's explained in detail, totally a cosmology number, has nothing to do with me. I'm not a cosmologist. I wouldn't know that number from a hole in the wall. That's the number. And it just turns out when you contract the 14 billion years by 900 billion, you do get 5.5 days. It's not a trick. It's what put the book on the bestsellers. The first year it came out, it was the largest selling science book worldwide in this field of physics and cosmology and the whole kit and caboodle. It wasn't a trick. The fact is both. It is 6 24-hour days. It is 14 billion years. If you want to look like God's forgetting these 6 24-hour days that the Bible tells us, let's just take this ratio. I want to calculate, supposing we were back here, what would it look like? Bingo, comes out to be exactly the biblical statement. The fact is the Torah has this information in it. It wanted a calendar because it helps you to, more and more data that you can prove shows more and more that it wasn't superfluous, that the information is there to be the stamp. And that's why Rashi, the opening Rashi doesn't make sense. Why does the Bible, Rashi 10:9, Rashi says, why does the Bible give us all this information up front? You don't need it. Well, he says, because in the future, people are going to say, you don't deserve this land. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? You don't deserve, it's Rashi here, 1090, it's almost 1,000 years ago. You don't deserve this land. Well, and they're going to say, no, but look, the Bible says God gave this land to me. Well, who cares what the Bible says? It's just a fiction anyway. But Rashi says, that's how you can make sense out of the Rashi. Rashi says, you can prove the Bible is correct by the data that are in Genesis chapter 1. Just look at those data. When does flight enter? Day 5 or day 6? Everyone would say day 6, but it's day 5, and it is day 5. Everyone would say 6 24-hour days, but it's billions of years, but it is billions of years, and it is 6 24. Point after point is provable. That's the stamp. If you have faith, you don't need this, but there are how many million, even just Jews. How many million Jews that don't identify with Judaism? I mean, they say they're Jews, but that's the extent. A few million. Yeah, thank God. Fortunately, so we got 5 million of them going through the proof of God in 5 minutes. But then our Jews, half of them are Christians. And there's billions of people. So the text has information that allows you to understand. And every time that you see a conflict between Torah and Teva, Torah and science, realize that you have to know both Torah and the Teva, the Torah and the Teva's word for nature and science to find the Shilu. Do I claim that I or others are able to match everyone? I don't claim that at all. But the ones that I've looked at in detail do come out to be matchable. So that's even a bit of the age of the university with evolution. Is it random or not? There's no chance to get into evolution out tonight. But remember that there are these changes that God thought 900-year-old people were a bad idea and knocked it down to 100. We seem to be doing a bit better since that time. But that shows that the venue can be changed and does change. And even though at the end of Genesis chapter 1, it says, and God saw all that God did and was very good, Tav Ma'od. Tav Ma'od is a pretty broad statement considering that Cain murders Abel. We have the flood takes place. Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit and they're kicked out of garden by chapter 3 and 4. I mean, really, that's good? Yes, so. Because it is mostly good. Even with the virus, it's mostly good. So I say, sei gesund. In fact, I've learned something else in German. I've learned this from one of my colleagues who speaks German. Sei gesund und dankbar. Sei gesund und dankbar. Go in peace and be very thankful.
Wow.
Go in peace. And I use that now because of the magnificent video of Gal Gadot's favorite prayer. And it's just amazing on this journal of millions of people. In America, like, I don't think it was Cosmopolitan, but it's one of those ladies' homes. It was one of these journals that, is popular. She's completely not embarrassed by being an Israeli Jew. And she says she's thankful about everything. And every morning she wakes up, she says, Modeh Ani. She says it in the article, and then they translate it. I thank you very. Modeh Ani. She says that every morning. She's thankful. I mean, that's called Kiddush Hashem. Anyway, for those that are still awake, I can't see anything or anything.
Okay. So Prof. Gerald, it's been absolutely riveting. Your lecture, your talk, your presentation, and wow. There's also saying sei gesund and bleib gesund, and go well and stay well. But Prof, really, can I ask you a personal question? When is your next book coming out? When is the next bestseller coming out?
I've been for 4 years now and then I've been working with my boys, also some of our kids, on the mind-brain interaction, and is there a universal mind, which I think there is. There a universal? I've written a bunch of drafts. He was pushing away. The idea of Descartes talks about the mind-brain duality, but he didn't have data. We have a lot of data. There are a lot of data. Then we now know that the universe is totally dualistic: energy, matter, particle, wave. So duality is part of the universe. So the idea of a mind-brain duality, that the mind is not part of the brain, is completely plausible with our scientific description of the universe. So the question then becomes, how do we show that is the case? There are many, what is it called, apocryphal, these near-death experiences. I've spoken with so many persons who have had these experiences, normal people, and I've spoken with people that are very high up in the NSA, National Security Administration, who they're sure that this exists. Well, anyway, so that's what I'm trying for, but I haven't been able to figure out how to put it down, nor have we, my kids and I. I'm going to figure out how to make it into something palatable.
Well, we look forward to it.
It's a big question. Say it again, please.
We look forward to receiving your new addition to your incredible books that you've published, and a next bestseller, because I'm sure it will be a bestseller.
Oh, if it ever gets to be sold.
Okay, so I'm going to open up to our guests out there. If anybody wants to make a comment or ask a question, the floor is yours. And Prof, can you take a few questions?
I can take questions. As you realize, I can't see except I'm afraid to click anything because of everything.
No, we can see you very well.
It's a big screen that says Zoom. I don't need to see anything.
Okay.
You can see me?
Yes, very well.
Yes.
Okay. So David, if you want to go ahead.
Yes.
I appreciate Professor Schroeder, and I heard you in Jerusalem when I was in yeshiva, and then I said in Young Israel Southfield when you were on a book tour, and your books were certainly part of what held me strong in Torah Judaism, because after I was in yeshiva, I went to University of Michigan, and I tried to study physics and ended up in civil engineering. I have my friend Jennifer Scharf, who has an undergraduate degree in physics, and we have a weekly podcast where we discuss the hard problem of consciousness. And so it's fascinating. That's what you're working on. It's exactly what I wanted to ask you. I have a few questions. I'm not sure if you want me to just run them all off or one by one.
Well, ask you, go ahead. I have no idea if I have any answers, but.
I wanted to ask you about Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff and the quantum mind hypothesis, if you were familiar with, I guess, the orchestrated reduction
I'm familiar
model
with some of Penrose's, but I'm not sure what source you're referring to. Other than I think Penrose must be a saint, because although he was not as photogenic as his primary student, Hawking, he gets very little credit, but most of the early papers are Penrose and Hawking, not Hawking and Penrose. Penrose is one of the major movers, and he's just that he accepts this having to say, it makes me think he must be actually a saint.
Well, just very quickly, Stuart Hameroff is an anesthesiologist in Arizona, professor there.
Right.
And Hameroff, on the quantum mind, Hameroff proposed that these microtubules that are uniquely found in neural cells could harbor quantum effects of quantum particles. So Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose came up with what they call the orchestrated reduction model of consciousness, that or quantum mind, which through these microtubules in neurons being able to harbor quantum effects, that could create some greater effect of consciousness. And even Jennifer here is trying to advance that theory even for a theory of reincarnation. But I mean, the physics of, I enjoyed what you said, and I was talking with Jennifer in the chat while you were messaging that the problem that, we call the hard problem of consciousness, or consciousness in general, is probably more important than cosmology. Like, the Big Bang, 6 days of creation, how that happened is important, but the question of consciousness is something that affects everybody, and seems like the frontier, like you're saying, that science is falling short of, decades and decades now. They've been predicting that they'll solve the hard problem of consciousness with a mechanistic model, and even quantum effects are unlikely to solve that problem. Hence, like dualism, or to say that no, in fact, science has demonstrated that consciousness or thought, or however it's going to describe, does not come from the brain. And scientifically, at this point, it actually makes more sense to say that the evidence is showing these phenomenon aren't arising from the brain. So a dualistic explanation.
These are or are not? I missed that what you said there.
Well, are not. That the hard problem of consciousness is going to be answered no. Consciousness does not arise from the brain, and that leaves room for, like your theory on the Big Bang, but in like a dualistic perspective, is say, well, if consciousness doesn't come from the brain, where does it come from?
It comes from the other dimension. I'll give you an example, which is, I won't mention the names, like I mentioned the names there, but it happened to one of our kids, and he's on a day when it's a Friday, and then it's the last day of a holiday, and then there's going to be a Saturday right after, and they're obviously not obviously the Shomer Shabbos, and they're davening away, and he comes across the name of a Hebrew name that is also used as a name for a woman, and a cloud of black pours over his psychological body, so much so that he goes to his wife and he says, something has happened terrible at this, and he mentions the person's name, and that's it. And you know, the day goes by, the next day is Saturday. Immediately after the Sabbath is over, the phone rings. He picks up the phone. The man on the other end says, I have some terrible news to tell you. And my son says, has something happened too? At which point there's like a 30-second silence on the other side. How did you know? The body was just found. It was horrible. They didn't find the body for a day and a half or 2 days, or whatever, you know, from that time. And had he not, now this person had not been in contact with our kid for well over a year, but they had helped this particular person achieve something that was quite amazing, okay? And so who knows what happened, but if he had not, and it's not a relative, so it's not like you're worrying about your son or your parent or whatever. They hadn't been in contact for well over a year. And had he not said that to his wife on the day when it was a day and a half before the end of the holiday and the Sabbath, it would mean nothing, because you can say, well, that's in retrospect, but he did say it then, and he couldn't shake it. And then the phone call comes, and he doesn't even wait for the person to tell him. He says, has something happened to so-and-so? So it sounds to me like there is, and that's just anecdotal, except it did happen in our family. So that there is a part, well, how is it said? Is a part of you, when you think of you as not the you see when you look in the mirror. What makes you is pretty much the part that's not of you. Look, and just an example, and you can say, well, that's how we interpret it. But I wonder I don't know how many people are listening or not listening, but it's important to remember that the universe is completely silent and pitch black. There is nothing, what we experience as light and what we experience as sound exists nowhere in the physical universe. It's hard to believe it, but that's this. I go like this, the molecules move, they hit the microphone, down, goes to the air, comes to you, but the air isn't booming. There's no booming in the air. You hear the air booming? No. It's only when those molecules hit your eardrums, they move and there's electricity, but there's no booming in your brain either. But we all experience booming and sound and blah, blah, blah. But there's no blah, blah, blah anywhere in the physical universe. The universe is silent, except for the fact that we experience something. It's very hard to, I'm not the first person to realize this, but when I realized it independently, and others have, I'm sure, tens of thousands of people, it's pretty much of a shocker. It's exactly the same as light. The universe is pitch black. There is no what we experience light anywhere in the physical universe. If it were, the air would be glowing. But guess what? I know, we know most of us, well, those that are in Israel now, it's dark outside. So go look up at the light in your, I'm looking at the light in the ceiling here. Well, there's a lot of light coming out of that light, but the air isn't glowing. There's no light glowing. It's only when those radiations of a specific wavelength hit the neurons in our retina. There's no light in your brain either. The universe is pitch black and silent. Yet, so the cop-out answer, well, that's how we interpret it's a meaningless answer. That's how we interpret those. Everyone interprets them exactly the same. The fact is, we interpret that, really? You think, you close your eyes and you can see, you can imagine light. You can still see the light bulb in your imagination, but there's no light in your brain. There's no sound in your brain, and there's no light and no sound out. So it doesn't relate to consciousness, but it does show that there are aspects of this universe that we just fluff away and take for granted. Well, of course there's sound in the universe. There's no sound in the physical universe. Well, there's no light in the physical. Yeah, God says there is light, but don't try to tell me because God says the light, the air is glowing, the air is not glowing. The universe is pitch black and silent, yet our major experiences of life are light and sound. So I don't say that necessarily relates to consciousness, but it does show that there are aspects to be people. So there are aspects in this universe that we just assume. Well, I was speaking to an editor. In fact, he turned down, thank goodness he turned it down. It was a lousy manuscript. Look at it. He said, well, I don't believe you. I think consciousness emergent. You put enough neurons together in your brain, you get consciousness. So he may think that, but luckily he's not a scientific person. I mean,
if you find a way to formulate it, that's definitely what I'm working on, and would love to read your insight. But yeah, obviously it's a very complicated topic. One other question, my own explanation, certainly me and Jennifer have, call it Hindu leanings. And from my estimation, almost all of the top Jewish physicists are Hindu, even historically, like Einstein and Oppenheimer. From what I understand, they credit Hinduism more than Judaism until today. Like Stuart Hameroff is a Buddhist, Penrose is atheist with Eastern leanings, and I could just go on and on, like Eric Weinstein, Lex Friedman, are people that find more inspiration in Hinduism.
What are the basics of Hinduism? What's the nugget?
Well, I mean, from my interpretation or my explanation, why these Jewish physicists find more meaning in Hinduism than our own tradition.
No, I'm just wondering, what does Hinduism give?
The basic axioms, sir, are least harm principle.
You don't have to call me sir, please. I'm just, hey, you, go ahead. Basic axiom.
The basic axiom is a least harm principle. So, seeing consciousness in flowers and caring about consciousness in general, accepting a shared root of suffering. And they have like later developments like Buddhism that speak on attached to it being the root of suffering and a path towards ending that suffering.
Does it have an idea that there's a consciousness in everything?
The term consciousness, from my research, and this is still ongoing, doesn't actually translate. So the way that they understand what we call consciousness is approached differently. So the word consciousness may not even have a translation.
Okay, well, that's...
But they certainly have an idea of what you might call a cosmic mind.
Yeah, well, that is certainly totally Jewish. I don't know which one's older, which one got the other. I mean, the basic understanding of that's brought down by the not just Mikubalim, but the Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, is that something called mind or wisdom is the substrate of the existence. Energy and matter are not, certainly energy is the substrate of matter, but energy is not the fundamental aspect. Rashi brings this down right in Genesis chapter 1. He says you can't understand Genesis, the opening sentence, unless you go to Proverb number 8. I am wisdom. God made me as the first of God's creations. Before the earth, wisdom was present. George Wald, the Nobel laureate who worked in his whole work was consciousness, says, it doesn't, I'm just quoting people that spent their life, getting the Nobel Prize in this field, says that in fact, he says it shocked him at first. It disturbed him scientifically that he suddenly realized that mind, M-I-N-D, is the substrate of all existence.
It's one of those things that's just really hard to translate. Like there is a foundational myth where there's a revelation to 7 sages who had 4, what you could call books very generally, but they're more like recitations, and that is the corpus, that is the basis of all knowledge.
Well, are you agreeing with my assessment that Jewish physicists tend Eastern? I mean, that Oppenheimer, when he creates the nuclear bomb, doesn't quote the Torah or Kabbalah, he quotes the Bhagavad Gita. And I think Einstein and, currently today, from what I would say, David Bohm and on from the most famous Jewish physicists, it seems that they got more inspiration from the East than our own tradition. But obviously, I'm a student of Professor Schroeder trying to get this information from the Torah. I just wonder if you had any insight as a physicist, why so many Jews don't follow your path and look for this in the East.
Well, I would guess that, first of all, remember that Abraham sends children to the East with gifts. I'm not familiar with the Bible, but Abraham has a bunch of kids after his first wife dies, and he has and he sends the kids off to the East with gifts. and the gifts that are, and that's all it says, the gifts, but all the commentaries say the same thing, the gifts with this basic knowledge of how God runs the world. And it's interesting that he does send them off to the East, so the East people may have a tamsit of this, a concentration of this information. But we do find that the best understanding of Genesis 1 is with not but a sheet in the beginning. First of all, the text never said in the beginning. That's the Greek. The Hebrew never said that. It's with a first cause of wisdom. That's what the Targum says 1900 years ago. With wisdom, God created the heavens and the earth. So the fact that sounds very much like what you're saying, but the Hindu is that there's a level of knowledge or something. Judaism holds by the fact, if you take this line, of which I think is the correct line, is that everything has an aspect of mind. Everything has an aspect, whether you're a stone, a person, an elephant, a pine tree, or a flower, there is an aspect of them. That's totally Jewish tradition. You have to go to the East for that. And that you learn that very quickly when God says that your brother's blood cries to me from the ground. The blood has an aspect that it's not just a metaphor there. It is actually saying that even blood has, well, anyway, I'm just getting to that, because wisdom is the substrate of existence, not energy. And
it's like a false perception, like the greatest minds at MIT that like, I'm a Jew, I know there's nothing there, but like, let me look in the East. But it's this false assumption because they think they know what's in Judaism, that there's nothing there to look for. And in reality, like the Sanskrit, like they're like, oh, you can't translate Sanskrit, so we have to learn Sanskrit. But even Jews don't think that about Hebrew and have a tendency to have a dissonance to not think the truth is in our own tradition.
Well, I think they probably don't know their own tradition. I'm not knocking anyone. Look, the East may have it also. As they say, yeah, Abraham sent over the gifts, so if they can find it there, can you hear it so? Let them find it there. But it is present also in the Jewish tradition. It's not by chance that so much comes out of Israel, just the understanding of nature. In fact, what is her name? Jerry Klein, a semi-philosopher, however, once said that how is it that there are so many of these scientists are Jews? I mean, why aren't they Catholics? Why aren't they that? Or if you're looking at for love of people, why were 80% of the white marchers to my chagrin and my shame, I was talked out of going, 80%, and that's a Quaker number, or been higher. 80% of the white marchers in Alabama the first march. It's before your time, but it was right in my time, and I wasn't part of that, although I signed up to go, but I allowed myself to be talked out of going because I really didn't want to go. 80%, according to the Quakers, were Jews. There were almost no white Christians present. If the Jews hadn't shown up, the march would have been just totally blacks. 80%, for a very short time, the symbol of Black rebellion was, go look at the history, guess what? The symbol of Black rebellion was that. Until it was figured out that you can get more mileage by hating the Jews than by liking them. Hence, Black Lives Matter.
But it's not really accurate because you're proving my point. It's just like the greatest physicists are Jews, but I'm saying from my experience, the greatest Jewish physicists are Hindus, relatively. If you had to classify, just like you're saying, the Jews who marched in Alabama, like there were almost zero Orthodox Jews who marched in Alabama. They were communist and secular Jews. Sure, it was mostly Jews.
Yarmulkes, that's why the yarmulke became a mark.
Yeah, but saying the majority of those people were not typically Orthodox. They might have put it on a yarmulke because they thought that it was something Jewish they were doing, but I'm saying it wasn't the Orthodox coalition of people that were marching. It was mostly...
I'm not talking Orthodoxy. I'm talking
I mean, it was mostly atheist, communistic type Jews that were likely to do that. It's some sort of paradox.
I don't know if they were communists or atheists. I would just say that I don't even know if they were, when they were questioned what they were by the Quakers, they said they were Jewish. So I guess they knew they were Jewish. I mean, how the Quakers couldn't look at the people and say they were Jews. I don't think they all had the typical Jewish, maligned type of.
Well, I mean, even the great physicists like David Bohm, I mean, he made Aliyah to Israel. If you asked him what he was a Jew. But if you asked him his religious beliefs, it would sound more like Hinduism, than Judaism, just like the marchers. If you asked them what they were or why they were doing it, they say because they were Jews. But if you asked them their affiliation, they would have probably been socialists and communists and left-wing activists.
Wait, so what brought people to be the marchers? This is easier than some of the physics. Well, we can take the physics also. Tell me about, let's see, actually, if you mention, it's interesting. This goes back really 1980s, 90s, and it was one of these beautiful dinners, and I didn't realize I was one of the people invited as I wasn't one of the beautiful people, but I was an Israeli that had been in China, and there's no relation to China. So the owners of the New York Times are having a dinner. I would never have accepted today because it could have been a plot. But to those days, people were naive, and it was in Hawaii because I was coming back via Hawaii, and there was a dinner, and in this case, it was the wife of the owner of the New York Times says, it's always wondered that the 5 biggest troublemakers in the world were all Jews. And she mentioned them. Freud, Einstein, Marx, Jesus, and Moses. I guess those are the 4. I'm just pulling ahead. But that is kind of interesting. I don't know if they were, I'm just pointing out that for somehow, Jews do show up, whether they're religious or not. They do show up. It's strange places. Now, what's her name? Jerry Klein pointed out the reason that she thinks this is the case is because when Abraham discovered the idea that there is a single overlining, I would call it a mind in the universe, a single overlying God in the universe, or whatever umbrella. So that I'll call it God, said, "You discovered me. I'm going to teach your descendants my secrets. Those secrets would be the secrets of the world." So is it Hinduism that made them great scientists? And I'm asking, that's a question. Is it being a Hindu made them great scientists?
Well, why does David Bohm? I mean, you just think David Bohm seems to give more credit.
I'm just asking you think it's Hinduism has made them great scientists?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I was hoping, I'm not as great of a scientist. Like, I only have an undergraduate background in...
No. I'm asking, do you think that Hinduism made those men the scientists they were?
Yeah,
I think they needed great men.
Well, I think they did need the Hindu, so to say, frame of reference to keep themselves in check. That David Bohm, Einstein, Oppenheimer, as a Jew who believed in Torah, could not have accomplished what they accomplished. They needed some sort of different framework, and Hinduism is what they use. And it's saying, like, David Bohm, if he repented and became an Orthodox Jew, I don't know if he would have came up with the same stuff.
Why label an Orthodox? Just let's say he became a Reformed Jew. How is that?
Well, I mean, say if he believed that the Torah had the secrets to the truth and was looking there, as opposed to thinking maybe there's secrets that could answer these questions in the East. And honestly, I don't know. I just know that the greatest Jewish physicists from my research seem to have put more credibility into the Vedas and the wisdom of the East than our own tradition. And that's why I'm a student of you.
He always referred to as the old one. I think his God, the old one, the old one. How could I? It could be that maybe the combination of whatever they get as Jews. I mean, it's hard to find a self-laid egg. So, or someone made a nicer analogy. People that a leaf that forgot that it's part of a tree. It's a nicer analogy.
Yeah, like scientifically speaking, you have to do the chicken and egg, like reverse the causality. So you could also say, David, that they were just great men, and the Hinduism is incidental to that. It's just like they would have been great, and Hinduism was just another vehicle into which their greatness flowed.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it's like Oppenheimer.
About that tradition. I'm not saying that's how I feel. I'm just saying that's another point to consider when you're looking at something as obscure as this, like, because it is sort of hard to not project the answer to questions like this.
Well, I mean, Professor Schroeder, I mean, like, I'm sure you're familiar with the Oppenheimer nuclear bomb, and he gives the quote from the Bhagavad Gita that, Shiva's the destroyer of worlds. And he's saying Oppenheimer couldn't have found a quote in Moses that expressed the same thing of making the bomb, or maybe he couldn't. Maybe there is nothing, or maybe it's just because he didn't know his own tradition well enough. I'm not familiar
with the quote. What did he say?
Behold, I am become death, destroyer of worlds, I believe is an opening quote on one of his books.
Oh, really?
And that's taken from
Okay.
the Bhagavad Gita.
Okay.
And maybe he didn't know his own tradition well enough to give a Bible
that's
verse,
pretty-
or
that-
maybe there
it
is
could-
no.
Look, most people don't. Most people, I certainly don't know Buddhism, and I don't pretend I know all of Judaism. But I would say that most people, don't. Most Jews don't know too much about Judaism, except for the fact that they are Jewish. I think of Stephen Weinberg. He's avidly anti-religious, yet he's part of the big. When I was speaking with, I really regret not having said to him that he's really part of the problem. That he's part of the problem. Part of the problem is that there's this ridiculously large number of Nobel laureates that are Jews. And he's one of them. So if he had kept his mouth shut, we wouldn't have all this anti-Semitism, maybe, that there'd be fewer visible Jews to yell at. I mean, there's statistics that don't make sense. Okay, why is it? You know the numbers. I don't have to make real the numbers. You know that Israel has more Nobel Prizes than the Arab world for plural, the Muslim world for sure. So maybe that's interesting. If you compare, maybe you should compare Islam and Judaism, and understand why the Arabs are not dumb. I can tell you, having since I live among them, we have some of my best friends are. No, that's not true, but some of my close friends are. I guess my best friends are Muslims. And why is it, with their vast number of persons, have they not made any progress in what they're doing? And Obama said the Arab Spring, well, that was truly a disaster. But as the nations now say, and at least the Middle East ones that are making peace with us, but why is it? With both Abrahamic origins from Abraham, why is it that the Jews have this ridiculous number? Totally, you know the numbers. I mean, so it's not like I'm telling you anything new.
Maybe it's the culture of Pilpul that is sort of the soil on which these developments flourish.
I think so too.
Other people are not incentivized to the same degree to hair split to the extent that you need to make progress in a lot of the fields where you can get a Nobel Prize.
Yeah, and I'm asking the 2.0 question is not only why are they Jews, why are the Jews that are doing these things largely Jews who reject our own tradition?
I don't know if they reject their own tradition. They just don't know anything about their own tradition. You can't reject what you don't know. I would say.
Well, how could they be so smart and never have looked into? I listened to guys like Eric Weinstein and Lex Friedman. I was like, is it really possible that these geniuses, Lex Friedman at MIT, knows close to nothing about his own tradition? And I put the fill-in on people to say, it's possible that these greatest Jewish minds in the world literally know elementary level about Judaism, and just mind-boggling that that's the case.
I think when you just, if I understand what you say correctly, I think is exactly the case. They just don't know anything, and they're certainly not directed towards it, because there's also a lot of superficiality that goes with let's say Judaism. Like super. I don't want to say. I just say there's a lot. It goes with it, but something. I think, frankly, my opinion is, and hundreds of other people have said, thousands, the same thing, that Jews for the last 3,000 years have selected for brains, and Catholics have selected for abstinence.
Do we lose him?
I think he's frozen. The professor's frozen. I'm not sure if he could hear us, or if his connection.
David and Jennifer, okay, while it's frozen, I just want to mention, if you think in the medieval times, the Ramban, the great,
had the most kids because
Prof is back.
Well, you froze there for a second, Professor. Les was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, we know that's a fact, that the richest man and his daughter married the smartest boy, which means they can have the most kids, because I'm not a rich man, but you don't stop supporting when the kids get married and the grandchildren are there. Okay, and that's exactly what went on for 500 years, or more close to 1,000 years. That these people were literally selecting for brains.
You also say the lure of, I mean, sure you know this better than better than me, but the lure of kavod begoyim to a Jew, that the temptation of being honored among the nations, even if the honor from the nations is not really the honor that a Torah person would want, and just say the average person is extremely tempted by honor from the goyim. I mean, especially the average Jew is extremely tempted to be honored by the goyim.
Well, I do find it pleasant. I spend hours and hours each week helping to work with a mega church, and I keep saying my friends in South America. That's the people I'm referring to. It's very enlightening, actually, because they ask questions that never occurred to me to ask. But it is, I find it pleasing that, you know, that they want to learn this stuff, and and it could be, I don't know if you want pleasure or not, but just wanting to be admired isn't quite enough to make you smart enough to get a Nobel Prize. When I went to MIT, a third of the students were Jews. It's slightly out of proportion for the Jews in America or the world. Now easily a third of the people are Asians. And it's true, because they have the drive. When I worked in China, I said, these families are just like Jewish families. They have the same exact drives that I see in the families that, you know, so maybe they are. So I don't know. Hinduism might be some of the seasoning that would bring out this intelligent in the right way. I have no problem with that. It's yeah, I don't see their problem. I don't think that they're worshiping any idolatry. There's no idolatry, I think, in it. Is there idolatry? I don't think so.
Well, I mean, some might take it more further than others, but I mean, I was just, you know, baffled because Jews typically don't look for the answers in their own tradition. Like, I studied Hasidus in Jerusalem, and, you know, I've read your books, and I find constantly answers in Judaism, and I find that these Jews who are better students than me, smarter than me, better at science than me, don't really think that there's answers in Judaism, but these same people will look for answers in other places, such to a point where, I mean, Les has I think a Chabad background where, you know, like you were saying, it's not surprising, it's almost expected. That I've seen it so much that it's more expected than surprising.
Well, I can absolutely understand that, because the image of the East is much more appealing than the image of how long you have to wait between meat and milk, or some of these other things that the rabbis have forced down our throats. Okay, pardon me for saying this on Root and Branch, but it is the case. You know, that may be stifling to have made that statement, but you know, a lot of don't add to the law. You know, the text never said don't subtract to the law and don't add to the law. Not one place. It always says don't add to the law and don't subtract to the law. Adding has been the major problem, I think. Not the only problem, but one of the major problems. God got it right. We didn't have to have all this stuff added to it. Adam was the big shot. He tells Eve, don't eat it, baby. God says, don't even touch it. There is nothing about touch. So Eve parrots back to the serpent, I can't eat it. I can't even touch it. And then it gets touched and nothing happens. So Eve thinks the whole thing is a bunch of baloney. Notice who had to have added to the law? Not Eve, Adam. Adam was the big shot. He had to tell her, don't touch it. Otherwise, the scenario doesn't make any sense. She had to believe that not touching it came from God. And the only way she was getting that information that Adam, her rabbi, was telling her, don't eat it, baby, don't touch it. God said nothing about touching. He said only don't eat it. But touching was the problem. So along comes whatever the serpent is supposed to be. It doesn't matter. It could be a snake, doesn't matter what it is. But the scenario has to be that somehow it was touched, nothing happened, and guess what? Eve picks it up and eats it. Now she knows it's not a problem, because if touching was going to kill her, she should have dropped dead on the spot. She didn't. So clearly the whole law is a bunch of baloney, which is what could easily have sent Eve off to the east to get the information Abraham was about to send his children off. So maybe that's where they got it. Maybe they got the spirituality. Could be. And I keep, so by the way, if I keep looking away from the screen here, it's not at an insult, but all I have on my screen is a big ZOOM. I don't see anyone. So I don't know how that happened, but some people.
Maybe
I'm looking-
Jennifer could help you out with your tech. Yeah, we help a lot of like streaming. I've been encouraging Lowell. They found me through streaming, and it's the best way to get the message out there these days, even book promotions, COVID-19. But there's a little bit of technology, older generation, the younger people are just young, all little kids, basically intuitively know how to do it. But I'm sure you could be walked through how to do it.
But there's a bunch of arrows. If I press the arrow, it would probably come back, but I'm afraid if I press the arrow, everything disappears.
Yeah.
I'm only saying when I look away from the screen like I'm doing now, because I don't see anything on the screen anyway. So,
but Prof, we see you. The main thing is that we see you. I just want to mention, David, what you said about not looking at your own sources, and look at our great Nachmanides, the Ramban in Spain. We had the greatest astrologers, and they were such proud Yidden. They were Orthodox, and they were very proud to be Orthodox. So, you look at through Jewish history, some of our greatest minds were very, very religious and kept to their traditions. And they are inspiration, and they still are inspiration to us all. So, maybe modern day now, but you look at the Ramban, there's stamps made of him all over the world. He's known, Maimonides is known all over the world. And he was very proud of his Jewish tradition, obviously. So, and he's admired. So, I don't know. We have to look at our own. And we've got so much to look at as well.
Well, these people, like, I think the names are out of my head, but, the inventors of Waze and the inventors of Facebook and the inventors of internet. Okay, it doesn't matter. I don't think they don't claim that. Then they don't deny their Jewish heritage. I think they just say they just don't
deny. They've never denied.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's disproportionate. If you look at those who won the Nobel Prize, the nominees, or those who have won the Nobel Prize, the Jewish proportion is way outweighs. We like less than 0. Whatever percentage of the world population, and yet we have such a tremendous high percentage of Nobel Prize winners in all the fields. In all fields of and those people who've won it, they're very proud to be Jews. So I think a lot of people admire the Jews because of the Jewish cop.
Yeah, that's yes, it is, and so I Hinduism is not what made them great scientists, but Hinduism may have been what, in my opinion, what, let's see, explained to them why they were great scientists.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, I'm not really sure what I just said.
No, I think that's.
I mean, every one of them knows that they are part of a group that is distinctly out of proportion with the general population, as far as accomplishments go, as is the state of Israel, out of proportion.
Yeah.
It was so close to being peace. People look up the Faisal-Weizmann agreement. King Faisal, the head of the whole Arab area, and Chaim Weizmann had an agreement, and it was perfect until one European country backed out, and then he tore up that agreement.
Is that true?
I said this is a great thing that's happening to the Arabs. The Jews will come here, and we'll have agriculture, and we'll have this and that, and then one condition. That condition was that he would get Lebanon, and one European country wasn't willing to give it up.
Wow.
Really was, it's 1925, about something like 30, something, 25, 30, 35, somewhere around that time, way before the state.
Wow.
Okay.
Well,
it is interesting about the Eastern religions, but then Maybe that's what Abraham sent off. There's no question. It says he sent his kids to the east.
Well,
Well,
okay.
what is it about Hinduism that you think makes it amenable? That these
It could be because it's so generic. It's universalist in many ways, where it's easy to work with. But Hinduism is more, at least from a Westerner, it's very spiritual, and it has complicated ideas about the philosophy of the material and mind question, like Advaita, Vedanta, and historically these arguments go back long periods of time, Ramanujacharya, Shankaracharya, and the questions that come in European Enlightenment, a lot of them were hashed out in India a long time ago. And if you're trying to create a system for the mind-body problem, the soul, material, spiritual interface, that Judaism has a lot on it, but it's not a popular part of our religion. You could go to Chabad or the Kabbalist, but like generally most Jews don't necessarily talk about that stuff, or it's not the ABCs of Judaism. But when you jump into Hinduism, to some extent, it could be easier. And then there's probably also the difficulty of a dual morality system that as a scientist, you want to be a universalist that's saying all the rules apply everywhere in the material world the same. But Judaism has this basic postulate that Jews are different than non-Jews, which is, you could match it within the system, but I think from the secular scientific mind, the dualistic nature of Jews being somehow fundamentally different from non-Jews is the first thing that Jews just like, no, that can't be a scientific principle. If Judaism assesses that there's some fundamental difference between Jews and non-Jews, even though most secular Jews still affirm that, but it's hard to create a philosophical system around. So like Oppenheimer or Einstein in any of these ways, like I do think it's Hinduism. I think that these Jews don't come up with their theory without Hinduism. Is it possible like the Bhagavad Gita, reincarnation, this wisdom, the Zohar at least makes a claim that maybe the Bhagavad Gita in as a Vedic scripture was actually given to Abraham. But even from this perspective, that'd be considered kind of like racist in university, where you're saying like, no, the Hinduism is true, but it's true because it comes from Abraham, which, it might be nice for a Jew to believe, but like you're saying, like, you're not going to be able to publicly state that in university. And then the archaeological evidence would be that, these ideas likely existed in the East far before the West. Especially modern day Judaism. If you even will humor me, like I did on my channel a review of what we'll call heretical Israeli literature, but I'd have to look up the name. I could if you wanted, but the claim is that creation ex nihilo is absolutely not a Jewish idea. And if you look into the Bible, and this paper brought hundreds of sources, and even the creation story is that it's almost certainly not a story of creation ex nihilo, because there's hundreds of places that talk about these waters that existed from before creation, and the creation from taking from these bodies of waters. And there's even literature that these bodies of waters that existed before creation had these, animals in them, and so on and so on. That from what my understanding of, like, we'll call the heretical Israeli scholars, is that creation ex nihilo is a Greek or foreign idea that Jews adapted, and that the original Jewish creation myth cosmology is much different in kind of the belief that there is this parallel universe with these great bodies of waters. And I'm not sure if you cover that in your book, or if you're familiar with the, and this is Israeli scholarship. I assume you could look at the verses, some of the verses that talk about what would appear to be a pre-existing body of water before creation.
Well, there's a statement in the Talmud by Rabbi Abahu that says, isn't mentioned till the fourth day, is to give a hint that God made and destroyed worlds before this world. Well, we know that's, as far as the solar system goes, that has to be true. Whether it relates to all the universes, I don't know. we know that our sun is not a first-generation star. That's pretty obvious. But I mean, it's obvious to anyone who studied solar generation. I have always learned that it was creation ex nihilo. Maybe some people have sources that say it's not. I certainly think that the mainstream understanding is creation from nothing physical.
But so the Israeli archaeological approach that says, basically Judaism used to be patrilineal, and then in Roman times or sometime.
Can you say it louder? Oh wait, my battery's low. No wonder it's getting quiet. 1 second, my computer's about to shut itself off. Here's the power plug. Here, 1 second. Gotta plug it in. Where is the?
Yeah, my Hebrew's not that great, but
Okay, I plug in.
I love reading Israeli heretical publications from like Bar-Ilan and Hebrew University, and questions like who is a Jew, patrilineal versus matrilineal descent. The Israeli I'll call them the heretics, maybe less is familiar. You will have this common view that Judaism used to be like this in the biblical era, and then due to Greek or Roman influence adapted some of these ideas, and even like a convert, that most Israeli archaeological experts believe that there was no such thing as conversion in biblical time, that you became a Jew through relation, either through relations, but from a Talmudic Orthodox approach, we, so to say, backdated. But I'm saying that's the Israeli.
How can that be? The great-grandmother of King David was a Moabite.
Well, I'm not going to argue the Israeli heretical scholarship.
I'm not just saying.
Based on the archaeological and.
That's a stupid statement. Well, from every archaeological place you're coming from, because the great-grandmother was Ruth, a Moabite. Yeah. A Moabite.
These scholars are claiming that what the rabbis said in the Talmud really came from other traditions than Judaism, and Judaism in a biblical period was significantly different, including creation ex nihilo, which essentially is a foreign idea to Judaism that at some point was adapted into it. And obviously your theory is a great theory, and who knows if these Israeli scholars have even heard of your scholarship. But I think the general idea of the whole purpose of your lecture is that there's an assumption of scientists that the Bible is just false. And if you're a scientist, you can't hold on to these ideas. And then the scientific approach of history and archaeology, especially out of Israel, I'm not even talking about anti-Semites, I'm talking about Israeli professors, is that most of the things that are in Judaism today were taken from the Greeks and Romans or other cultures, and the rabbis interpreted backwards, and saying patrilineal versus matrilineal descent is the most famous, because almost all Israeli scholars that are not religious think that historically it was patrilineal, and then at some point it changed to matrilineal, and the rabbis just like you give arguments that no, it was always a matrilineal, despite what they would claim the overwhelming evidence. And like I said, there's a whole bunch of verses that they take from Psalms and Torah and the prophets that talk about these pre-existing bodies of water, and sometimes even the bodies of water have these great sea creatures. And obviously your answer from a Torah perspective is like, yeah, the God created and destroyed a whole bunch of worlds, so that could answer the question. But from the secular Israeli scholarship, they're looking, when's the first time that the concept of creation ex nihilo appears in Judaism? And they're claiming that it's pretty late in their tradition. I'm not sure is there such a phenomenon? Does secular Israeli scholars and rabbis even debate? I had Rabbi Gottlieb, I was on the Or Semitic trip, and we traveled up north to like Yavna, and the tour guide was giving historical stuff, and the Rabbi Gottlieb started to argue with the archaeologist, and that's the only time I've really ever seen such a thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, Finkelstein, certainly, it's interesting because what you really have said, something is called an oxymoron. You say these secular Israeli XYZs. The biggest mitzvah that a Jew can make is to live in Israel. Everything else is secondary. Israel's the biggest Kiddush Hashem that's come down the pike in 2,000 years. So there are no secular Israelis. They hate it when I tell them that, but they find it, but all the ones that I've discussed it with in depth always come around to the fact that, yeah, it's true. It is one of the biggest commandments in the Bible. And fundamentally, Kiddush Hashem is the biggest commandment. You can wait 15 hours between meat and milk, but it doesn't matter for beans versus next to Kiddush Hashem. And Israel is the biggest Kiddush Hashem. And I've had this discussion with a lot of people that think that they were determined that they were secular Israelis. They just happened to have fought in 1948 and 1967 and spilled their blood to have a state. But why? Oh, because we're secular Israel. I mean, you understand that in the brain, they got a bit of a, what's that called? When you say something, you don't mean it, but it's called
cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance is exactly what they suffer from. There are no secular Israelis. There's some Israelis that wait between meat and milk. There's some Israelis that keep Shabbos by going to the beach and spending time with their family. And there's some Israelis that wouldn't think of turning on a light switch if their life depended on Shabbos. Of course, it'd be Gerald in itself, risking your life. But there are those. So different people keep different laws. That is one of the basic shortcomings of why people may run away to other religions and not see it, because the most vocal of the people that think they're religious think that the other people aren't religious, and to say if it's matrimony or patrimony, what does it really matter? We know that Ruth, the great-grandmother of King David, was a Moabite. There's no question about that. She comes from Moab. Naomi goes out. She's got two sons. They're nice, born to Jews, but they jerk off or something, and the sperm goes onto the ground, and God kills them, and they die. We don't know how they died. They were evil. And guess what? Ruth comes back, and then the one that goes back becomes a great radio star, Oprah, right? That's the name of the other of the two wives that decides to go back to her people. She becomes a famous radio star in the year 1999, 2000. But Ruth is a Moabite. So what do you mean you can't become Jewish? Any rabbi that says that, you should be, we know where his head is.
But did you ever consider, like Richard Dawkins, or think like Rabbi Shmuley Boteach even, and he doesn't have a background in science, or Rabbi Jonathan Sachs without a background in science, thought it was important to debate atheism and debate against evolution. And there's not too many prominent Jewish scientists. I almost see zero. I'm saying, as I say, Rabbi Sachs, blessed memory, and Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, neither one of them are scientists. But did you feel a need to get into the arena and debate these people, or you didn't feel that was your task or counterproductive?
Well, Rabbi Sachs, about 20 years at Limud, I'd never met him. He'd never met me. One of my books that first came out, he thanked me, changing his understanding of science.
Well, he went on to debate Dawkins and evolution
exactly.
many times.
Yes, because science was no longer a conflict to him. Science didn't. Before that, he was sure scientists were wrong. I think that's what he told me. I don't know if he's so true. That's what he told me. Whatever, he's flattering me. Debate
was never one of your interests.
I don't think. I only had one debate, and I decided I was going to do something stupid, which I did. So I won't bring that up. But the rest of the times, I'm happy to debate. You want to set up a debate? I'll be happy to debate. Yeah. But getting back to the spirituality, if in fact the basis of the universe is not in the beginning, but with the first cause of wisdom, God created, based on Proverb number 8, which is the Perush, which is the explanation of the first sentence of Genesis. That's why Rashi sends us. If you understand Genesis chapter 1, read Proverb number 8. I am wisdom. God made me as the first of God's creations. So wisdom is the substrate. So if you want something spirituality, there it is. Mind or wisdom. It's the origin of consciousness. Everything has consciousness. Rocks, pieces of paper, everything has a mind in it. We just don't speak rock. We barely speak bacteria talk. But maybe we'll get to speak rock talk someday. Anyway.
Jennifer's got a lot of theories on reincarnation. I don't know if you have thoughts or ever include reincarnation in any of your works. I don't recall offhand hearing you talk about reincarnation.
Well, I think the Torah certainly hints at life after death. I bring that in the books many places, but always the sequence, every death that is described in detail, not all are described, but every death that is described in detail, with no exception. Person dies, is gathered to his people, and then sometimes a lot later is buried in the family crypt with the bones of his deceased relatives. He's died, he's gathered to his people, and then he's buried. It's never he's died and he's buried and he's gathered to his people. Jacob's the most obvious one, where he dies and is gathered to his people, and then 2 months later he's buried in Hebron. So what's this gathered to his people?
Yom Hashtalkus. Is it the Yom Hashtalkus?
I'm not sure what you're saying, I'm sorry.
In the Chabad literature, the Hebrew term is Yom Hashtalkus, the day of gathering. Like the yurtzeit, the day a person dies, is the Yom Hashtalkus.
I'm not sure the second word. Yom
Hashtalkus, I think. I thought that meant gathering, the day of gathering.
Hashtalkus. I'm not sure. But I do know that all the people, including my Aunt Gert, who never heard of life after death or anything, was the simplest woman you can imagine. It's a very simple life, and they gave her the wrong medicine, and she was dead in the hospital. She was dead, clinically dead, and because she was allergic to some kind of medicine, I don't know what it was. And then she told me that she told my mother, bless Mary, also, but she told me, President also, that she had this most amazing dream. That there was, and she would mention maybe my grandma Hannah, her mother, my grandmother, her mother, came, and she was, not old, but so pleasant. She was greeting her, and my uncle Georgie, who predeceased her, her brother was there, and all of that generation and the parent generation were there in her dream when she was dead. And then she came back to life, and she told us that dream. But that's exactly the same dream that everyone has in these near-death experience. Not everyone that has this, everyone that experiences this near-death and has a dream they remember, that's what they remember. That they're greeted by their long-lost loved ones or relatives, the long death. So,
Jennifer has some quasi-scientific theories to explain it. I mean, the Hasidic and Kabbalists, from my understanding, you're probably familiar, on the day of death, like you said, is gathered to the people. And the Lubavitch Rebbe explaining, from where I read it, you said the whole essence of the person from when they were born till they died, possibly including all prior lives also, is gathered into one essence, that not just the person and their soul, but the sum total of all their deeds from birth till death is gathered together. And that's, you referred to, I thought the terminology was Hishtalkus, but I'm not an expert in Hebrew. But
Hishtalkus usually, Hishtalkus is you make this effort.
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong with the term, but that's the idea of praying by a yurtzeit, that on the day of death, that the merit of the person is there for the taking for anybody, that the whole sum total of everything that person accomplished while that soul was in the body is available on the day of death, and all the day of deaths in the future for people, the descendants or the prayers. And that's the mystical conception of our understanding, whether that refers to like reincarnation, as Jennifer proposes. What does it mean that everything is gathered, and then where does the soul go? Does it re-enter another body, or does it go to a spiritual land to wait?
Well, the near-death experience certainly sounds like being gathered to your people, that all your people, there are all those people greeting you. I mean, that's what happened. Of the 4 people that I've interviewed in depth that have had this, they all had, separately, obviously, over a few years, they all had the same thing. They were,
It's
one of them
like,
said, excuse me?
It's not like Hinduism.
The mother said to her, it's not your time, go back.
Like most reincarnation, or kind of like returning to nature, you get reincarnated and spread the ashes in the Ganges or something, and become one again with nature. That Judaism said, no, you become one again, not with nature, but your people.
Well, why is it that you have to be buried in Judaism? You have to be buried in something that's in decay. Can never be. It has to be a wooden casket, and it has to be that your clothing has to have stuff that can hold decay. So some people burn themselves to get decayed, and Judaism just takes a longer period to decay. But you can't. I mean, but all of that's tradition, and whether whether the Chabad tradition is correct or not, I don't know. Certainly the Rebbe had insights that are that are astounding. But the text does say they died and they're gathered to the people. And the person that comes back from the near-death experience says, gee, I was gathered to my people. I met Uncle Georgie and Grandma Hannah and Aunt Gerth and, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, sounds like gathered to the people to me.
Prof, can I say
something? We're all the people.
Yeah.
I'm just taking the text of the Bible and the experiences that people have had without any mysticism. No mysticism, just saying that that's it. I'm not saying that it's not mystical, but I'm just saying that seems to match exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Prof,
so I think that there is this life. And I do think that this person contacted my son because there's no way that he would have had it. And then it's just completely out of the blue. And the example I gave before of the death of this person.
Can I just say something, Prof?
So I think
you know the story with when Saul, he went to the witches of Nov and he wanted to call up Samuel, and he actually did call up Samuel.
Yeah.
And Samuel appeared to him.
Yeah.
So the whole concept in Judaism is that after death, you aren't like reincarnated into like an animal, you still remain. And we see this in Tanakh, where actually Saul called up, and then the witches of Nov, or whatever, they were managed to call up Samuel, and he appeared. So I think this shows
as Samuel. He appeared as Samuel.
As Samuel. He appeared as Samuel. So we realize that there is,
that's
Tanakh.
Tanakh.
That's in our Tanakh. So that's the foundation of Judaism. That Samuel appeared as Samuel. He didn't appear in another form. So that's where we believe that you gather to your people, but Samuel did reappear, and the whole valley of the dry bones. We don't know what will happen when Mashiach comes, if the resurrection of the dead. The whole question is, how will you appear, in what state? But we really do believe also in Tchias HaMeisim. So it's very real.
Excuse me. Yeah. So, but look at the people that met my Aunt Gert and the other 4 people. They were greeted by people. I mean, I don't mean people that were walking around the room, but they were not images of a cloud that was speaking to them. It was Grandma Hannah, and it was Uncle Georgie, and it was Aunt Ruth and Uncle Phil. They were personalities that were still identifiable by this person that had these people. This is the case my aunt that had this near-death experience. Also, the other 3 people that I,
You think you could give like Penrose Hamerov, that there would possibly be some materialistic physical explanation to explain a phenomenon like reincarnation? I mean, Jennifer has his theories of how that might be possible, but there would be some essence outside of the person after they die that you could scientifically describe this process, or you think that will be beyond the description of man?
I think from what I've thought about it, which means nothing more than that's what I'm thinking about it, is that if it's metaphysical, we can't demonstrate it in the physical world except by these experiences, that each one is anecdotal, but when you put them all together, they seem to have a pattern, which is how inductive reasoning is done. I mean, how is it most of scientific experiments, unlike the great breakthroughs, but the daily work is inductive reasoning, and that means anecdote, and finally you see it's a general pattern. The general pattern is here that these personalities remain as individual personalities. I wouldn't even have a guess. And I'm familiar with the idea of those microtubules in the structure of the cells would be having of the dimensions of quantum effects that Hamerov and Penrose work on. I have no idea. For that you have to really be I would think would have to be a super expert to be able to comment on it intelligently as to whether.
One thing that's interesting to note about this very recent development for some scientists that have both gotten better results than general relativity using a model that models things the way I do, as well as entangled photons getting quantum supremacy. If you're interested, you can just Google it. I think it was published in December. But they managed to get a system of 72 entangled photons, I think. And I just looked it up again, and there's been another breakthrough in the meantime that I haven't fully researched yet. But there's been a proof of concept for the modality of consciousness. My theory predicts it, which is entangled photons, or a diffraction pattern of photons, more accurately.
You mean like entanglement and force at a distance? Is that?
Well, the idea is that like photons are not subject to the Pauli exclusion principle. So there's no limit to how many you can fit into a particular phase space. So the phase space is entirely precipitated by fermions, the massive waveforms. And that is like a crystal that the light permeates in it, not equipotentially, but it has a constant maximum speed. And everything is just like I don't want to say retardation, but that's like the best word that comes to mind, of that fundamental speed through massive matter. And that's been just demonstrated to work the principle that entangled photons, or more, the way they did it was diffracted photons, but it's the same thing. And they got a better result than any classical computer could at solving. I mean, it's a bit of a trivial demonstration because what it did was simulate its own eigenstates and solve the problem of what does a 72 photon distribution look like, but nevertheless, it can be used as like a basis for a more efficient computation. So this will be interesting to watch in the future. It's very new now. Photonics as a quantum computer has been, they called it a dark horse in the recent news article that covered it. So relatively unknown, but I predict there'll be a lot of cool developments in that coming up.
By me, it's totally unknown. I haven't looked into that field of investigations or endeavor at all. So I'm just completely.
If you read Henry Bergson or some Bohmian mechanic.
Yeah, hang on one moment. I have to just, my wife asked a question. Just a sec. Hang on a sec.
David and Jennifer, this is really quite amazing. You know, so nice that you joined tonight. And Gerald, we've been going on now for, it's like 2.5 hours, but it's really amazing.
You got it. I know it's late there. I mean, hopefully we'll honor Professor Schroeder with some people who have a background in physics that really appreciate his research.
But it's not only his research. He speaks at AISH, and he influenced Jonathan Sachs in his whole outlook on science. Many people that have gone through the discovery program at AISH, they've changed, after hearing his presentations. And I often used to hear when he'd give a presentation at the OU, the Israel Center, and it was packed. And we've got a lot of views on YouTube when it came to Gerald Schroeder when he spoke about any of the topics. People are really interested to hear from like a religious Jewish perspective.
Yeah, well, there's some difference between speaking to a lay group and a scientific group. And I was even mentioning that, Rabbi Boteach and Rabbi Sachs are probably the most prominent Jews who debated against atheism and evolution, and they don't have a scientific background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's been very, very interesting to talk tonight. And really, guys, thanks so much. I don't know how long Gerald can be here, because it is a little now. It's going for like just after 11:10.
We absolutely adore these conversations. I think I spent 4.5 hours on, I don't know if you know Wolfram, but his stream. He's, Duvie can tell you more. He knows more about him, but he's got like a whole physics platform for computation. And
he doesn't have Hindu leanings, but yeah, he's probably the most famous Jewish scientist in the world, I would say, Stephen Wolfram. I mean, he has computer software and companies, and he's also a wealthy man. I mean, he's up there with one of the most famous. He's more mathematician, computational, and he was actually a student of Richard Feynman, and I think he's Jewish. His wife is Jewish. He went to Eton in London. Almost never talks about Judaism, and like I was saying, I would guess that even though Stephen Wolfram is probably one of the smartest people in the world, his level of Judaism is probably about a third grader in Jerusalem.
Wow. Sure, it's quite amazing. But you know, it's also, what's so sad is that there's so many people that are searching, and they, you know, the whole story where you like go all over the world and you've got it in your own backyard, and they've never really gone into what Judaism's all about. They've never looked into Kabbalah. They've never looked into the mystical sources of Judaism, and they've gone all over to all different other like religions and other places without really looking at their own. And that's a tragedy. It really
I know
is
from
quite
my
a
own
tragedy.
experience that my mom, she likes, you know, her tradition, but she doesn't really think that there's these great answers in her own tradition, as where my father, a non-Jew, is much more amenable to believing that there's answers to these great traditions, like in the Talmud, or the you know, the Kabbalah, Chabad, Hasidus, and you know, so it's interesting that like a Jewish nature to I mean, the Talmud clearly says that you know, there's no Yetzer Hara in a non-Jew to, you know, there's a Yetzer Hara of a Jew to reject her own wisdom. There's not necessarily that in a non-Jew, but you know, even most Chabad, like, there's serious information, like Professor Schroeder, like Jewish mysticism, that corresponding with quantum physics and various things.
Yeah.
But it's rarely talked about in Jewish circles, even to, you know, from Reform to ultra Orthodox. You know, when I was in a Baal Tshuva, you know, I knew the Boston Rebbe's son and people, and almost everyone I talked to was interested in these things, but it's a minority. Probably like in a synagogue, like 1 out of 30, 40 people are interested in these, you know, these fields, and a lot of the people interested in these
Sorry, I had
fields
to, I left.
don't have a scientific
back.
background.
It's good to have you back. Prof,
I
are
do
you,
this.
Prof, are you okay?
Yeah, let's see.
If I could mention something maybe to
I hit
help
the
your
right
research
button.
in your book, because me and Jennifer have had a podcast for 2 years, and this is, you know, I mean, I'm a civil engineer and like landlord, but I study this in my spare time. There's Henry Bergson, who, you know, over 100 years ago, French Jewish philosopher, and he comes up with, you know, called the projected universe, and David Bohm, Bohmian mechanics, like kind of this holographic universe in various understandings of how the universe could be like a projection. It's beyond my physics understanding, but the consciousness study with quantum mind is taking the same direction, that consciousness is somewhat like a projection, like a holograph, I guess is the word that they use. So the microtubules, these effects, create a holographic structure that emanates from the body. And there is some evidence of this, like, I mean, of electromagnetic signals, or that the body itself generates a larger, what we call sphere of electromagnetic potential, and that consciousness resides from this, not in the brain, but a projection that comes from the brain, as opposed to the classical dualist, that the brain is a receptor. That consciousness doesn't come from the brain, but the brain is a device, like the Kabbalist who guessed it was the pineal gland. Although, you know, I think Hamarov's microtubules accessing quantum phenomena is more
leave out
likely
the
than.
physical, because we don't know where it is. But what is it? Forget whether it's the pineal or the microtubules, because that's totally speculation. But what is it then?
Well, it's saying it's a projection. Consciousness is some sort of electromagnetic quantum projection that doesn't reside in the body, but is an effect greater than the material body.
Well, is it? Well, when I'm hearing you say that, it's something that is generated by the body.
It has its energy added to it. It's powered by the body, but that's the starting point. So you think of the body as basically like your electric, you're plugging it in. So the the starting metaphor is like an antenna versus a radio signal. The mind is more like the radio signal, and the antenna is more like the body. But in this model, the antenna is like
No,
both receiving and sending to the mind.
And so where's the mind?
The mind is basically, the body is a geometric subset of the mind. The mind is, like Dubin said, a sort of contorted spherical electromagnetic waveform.
That is what?
That is the thing that is responsible for everything in your body. So that's not your subjective consciousness, because there's a lot of things that you do that are just not, you're not consciously aware of, like digestion, right? So some portion of that is responsible for what you could call a projection, i.e. generated by the intake of food, creating a crystallized photonic structure, which then presses against the flesh to sort of animate it like a balloon. And so there's a subset of that that creates what you could call a holographic projection, which is what we experience as subjective consciousness. So kind of like a pinhole throughout a larger thing. If that maybe that last one's not a great metaphor. I'm sorry, I know these concepts are quite abstract, but you as a physicist may actually be able to appreciate this, because it is essentially a geometric argument. And also I wanted to mention real quick that I sent 2 links to Les, if you're interested, Professor, and want to have a look at them about these recent developments in quantum computing. They're just short little articles. Yeah,
my email is easy. There's a bunch of emails, but they all come over to the same place. The shortest, you want to send it by email? The link?
I've put it in the direct message to Les. So if
you're better off just emailing it him than having.
Or
Les
I can
do
just email it directly to you. Yeah, I'll look that up. No worries.
Actually, my email is on my website, but it's but I mean, otherwise, just the simplest one is just gschroeder@h.com. But there's more exact ones that are.
These are some of the most recent theories of quantum mind, and there's a lot of mystical overview, people who have, like Kabbalistic or Hindu leanings of an understanding, in combination with the most recent theories of quantum mechanics in extrapolation from that of how consciousness might work. I mentioned Henry Bergson, who wasn't even a physicist, but a philosopher who had the idea of the whole universe as a projection, or at least consciousness as a holographic projection, to more recent discoveries in I don't even know how to say it. And Jennifer knows more physics than me to express it, but she only has an undergraduate degree in physics.
Well, see, the experiences that we know exist. Oh, I have no answer. I mean,
yeah, it's really hard with subjectivity, because you get to the problem with subjectivity where it's like, we don't know, we can't be sure about the nature of what it is that we know. We can just be certain that we know something. But then when there's this like rabbit hole, so I think, I don't even know if we're going to be able to solve the consciousness problem, but we really do appreciate listening to our pitter patterings, because we find it just fascinating.
I think it may be possible that there just happens to be mind that is totally separate from body, only because of the fact that the best translation of the opening sentence of the Bible is with wisdom God created the heavens and the earth. The Reshit, with a first cause of wisdom. I'm straight out of the text, and it has all this overtone of other parts of this mysticism, but it just seems to cut it to something that is completely devoid of anything physicality, so that consciousness can remain even though there is no body, and hence that would allow for these personalities to exist without the physical body. We know that if we do not accept the fact of, like Mike Schwarmer and others, that it's the great hallucination, like the book by Alexander, Proof of Heaven, and he called it, in scientific terms, proof of hallucinations. Well, if we don't take it as a hallucination, but if we do think these out-of-body experiences are real experiences, then these personalities remain, even though the body is completely gone. There's no body left. It's all been eaten up by the bacteria and the worms. So there's no nerves left. There's nothing left. And yet these people retain their personalities.
That is so beautiful, because that's exactly how I described it. Because people are always asking me, like, well, what's reincarnating? What's reincarnating? I'm like, your personality. That's what's left.
Well, I think that's what makes it. It's the you that makes you you, you don't see in a mirror. The you that you see in the mirror. I just used to say the you that makes you you is not the you think is you. But another person made that short and said, the you see in the mirror is not the you that makes you you.
Yeah, it's a puppet. It's your puppet. Made of
That's
flesh.
nice. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And if these near-death experiences are true, and if my Aunt Gert really had this experience, as well as these, one was a major donor to Aish, and I have a picture of me. It all came about from the major donor. I have a picture I can't get to right now of me under. There's a bunch of pictures of me on the, and I'm watching Barbara come towards me, my wife, and the camera caught it. And I've had that the first time that I used to have it was taken at a time when there actually were plastic negatives, and I wanted to make copies. And for the first few times that I went to make copies, the store, the photo shop, apologized that they couldn't get rid of a certain kind of a glow. They don't know what the matter was. You look at it carefully, you can see it's coming right out of my head. The camera caught this, it's like a thousandth of a second. Another thousand seconds later, maybe it wouldn't have been there. But it is in the negative, and I've since lost the negative. But I'm just looking at a copy, but I can't reach it. It's up on a out of general view, and the glow is such that when I had more hair on my head and my hair is standing up, the hair breaks, obscures part of that glow, so it couldn't be touched in because you'd have to have like a micro something, and why would touch it up anyway? So there really was this kind of something coming out of my head. I showed it to a person who was lives around here. He's black belt karate, and he said, "Oh, it's a chai." He said, "No, he's oh yeah, it's a chai picture. We know those types of things." It was just, I guess that they call the chai is some kind of force that the head had. He just tossed it off as being something not so spectacular. So
as a scientist, if like you have Descartes dualism and Leibniz dualism, but can we create a scientific model for at least the observable interaction of the spiritual and material realms? I mean, like the sages, the Kabbalists, all the talk about action reaction in terms of mitzvahs, but in some sort of term where there's a minimal understanding of consciousness, if it's received from the brain from another realm, that there should be traces, besides for the incidental stories, but a scientific process to say, yes, the brain is in fact a receiver to another realm.
Well, Olaf Blank discovered a portion of the brain, and now I'm not so sure he can use it. He obviously is a neurologist in Scandinavia, a straight meat and potatoes person. It's all mind. There's nothing spiritual. But Olaf Blank, Blanke, stimulating out-of-body experience. He found a structure in the brain, which you have and I have and everyone else has, that when you stimulate it, you experience yourself outside of your body. And he published this in Nature. So it's not like it's a peer review, well, obviously because he's quite a famous neurologist, and it was such that he titled it "Stimulating Out of Body Experiences," and these patients with whom he's working are stimulating that portion of the brain. They emotionally left their body and saw from above, the room. Now, I don't know if he was hitting the antenna or he's just stimulate part of the brain that makes you, I mean, I can close my eyes now. I know exactly where my feet are. Thank God my brain still works that much. I can see my toes inside my shoes, or I can imagine them inside my toe. So this could be just the part of the brain that makes you aware of, but he did not label it as that. But he does in no way does he say that this is mind. He just says that you can make yourself consciously remove the experience of self outside of your body, and you consciously feel that you are outside of your body. And that's it. He does not say it is mind. I make that clear. He's a person who, from all of his writings, thinks that there is no such thing as a mind.
In your book and all your research, you're saying you can't really do better than that. There's just these incidental.
That's why it never became a book. Yeah,
you can't really formalize a theory of mind. You can just point of mind-body dualism in a scientific way. That at this point, there's no way to have a scientific theory of mind-body dualism.
I would say mind-body, and then the Torah link is trying to say that it's there, but it's not adequate from a science point of view. Yeah, I don't see how I don't wonder how you do it scientifically, because if the mind is actually metaphysical, so that tells you you can't measure it by physical means because it's metaphysical. Radiation, light beams are not metaphysical. You can put a detector and you will measure light beams. You know? But mind may be, in fact, someone once said it, that your brain may be the only antenna that can pick up mind. I wish I could remember.
Hamerov would say that there's levels of consciousness. Any organism with neural cells or these microtubules that could harness these quantum effects will have some level of consciousness. And there's actually studies on like plants or different ways of testing what is consciousness, like from an anesthetic point of view, and whether lower life forms could, scientifically to some point be described to have levels of consciousness. And there's even theories that you have like rankings of levels of consciousness and some sort of testing marks that they would give for, like plants or various things that would appear that even plants or single-celled organisms are doing some sort of conscious interaction with the environment that is beyond the materialistic ability of the whatever the material that
to
makes
explain
it up itself.
Materialistically. Yeah, you see that with bacteria that you can train them in a maze, which is extraordinary. Friends, it's 11:30 and it's time.
Okay, Prof, we want to thank you so much. Well, we've been on for, wow, it's a long time, 8:39. 3 hours.
That was great honor. We appreciate you answering our questions.
I know. Stop, honor. But you know what is? I'm going to show you a picture that was painted. I mean, I never met the guy, but he'd seen some of the books, and he was one of the earliest painters of Marvel comics with Batman and
Oh, that's right.
Going back 60 years ago. I terrible. His name is. If you go to somehow I'm on Wikipedia. I don't know how I got on, but I'm on Wikipedia.
Yes, I've seen that picture, Prof. I actually saw it.
Oh, okay. So here it is. He was one of the earliest artists of Marvel comics, I think, or DC comics, the ones that had not recent, like 60 years ago, 50 years ago. So here are two of the paintings that he did. I had no idea who he was. I don't know. Does that show up there?
It shows up. This one, the second on your right, shows up if you
see the bracious. We could read the bracious.
It's wonderful. It's magnificent. Magnificent.
Isn't that? Yeah, that's the one that has the darkest. It's on the right. This one here is the one I think that's in the Wikipedia.
Yeah.
That's what. And I had no idea who he was. And a friend came over talking, and I mentioned it strangely, and it turned out that this friend of mine was good friend of his, but they hadn't seen each other for 25 years.
Wow.
We looked it up on, I don't know, either maybe Barbara's on Facebook, and we discovered that he only lived about maybe a half an hour drive from here. And ultimately he came over, Michael Netzer came over, and I'll tell you, when the two guys, the one that knew him and was visiting, came over to my house for some reason, I'm really not sure. I mean, they just fell into each other's arms. They were such close friends, decades ago, and hadn't seen each other. Really, suddenly, anyway. So
Wow. Prof, what a way to end. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
It really has been a tremendous honor and a privilege to have you tonight.
Well, it was fun. I don't think we solved I would say from the last hour or so, what we solved was that we're not really sure what consciousness is. I think from the fact that these personalities, I'll just take from my Aunt Gert, who were dead a decade or more when she met them, when they got the wrong. And she said something quite wonderful when they revived her. And they told her what happened about that they were clearly afraid of a lawsuit, but my Aunt Gert is not going to start suing people. She's a much simpler person than that. And so they gave him the wrong medicine. She gave her the wrong medicine. Her reply was such a beautiful reply. She said, "I'm never taking that medicine again."
Well, Shem should bless you. Bracha, Hatzlacha. You should. We pray that you finished the work and we could read it, and even another book tour. Make it to Detroit again if you can.
Yeah, maybe. But I think again, the fact that these personalities still exist when the body's totally decayed.
Yeah.
He says explicitly that if they're not, maybe that's the only way that those antennas can get it into your brain, into our brain, so that we understand it. But it's not dependent upon our brain. That's what I have. That's what I would sum it up. That our brain may be the only way that we can hear this mind, and that wavelength of that mind is specific to each individual, unless you are able to train you, perhaps. But the fact that it remains, if it is true, if these things are true, and if my Aunt Gert is correct, and these other three people that are totally normal people.
And Prof, and the Tanakh is true with Shmuel.
Yeah, and there it is there. Yeah, and that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and the Tanakh has it already.
Yeah.
And then that the opening sentence is, as 1,000 years ago said Rashi. Well, first of all, it can't be in the beginning. The grammar is completely wrong, so it can never be that. But that is ba reshit, ba with a first cause of wisdom, and that first cause is, as Rashi says in Proverb number 8, wisdom, with the first cause of wisdom. That's the Jerusalem, the Targum Yerushalmi.
Yeah.
It says, "Chachmata bara Elohim." With wisdom, God created the heavens and the earth.
Wow. So
Not that God was wise, that the substrate of existence is mind, or wisdom, or brain, or however you want to say it. Anyway.
Thank you so much, and all the very best, and Admei Besrim in good health. We need you, Prof. You're inspiration to us all, and we are so honored that you were on tonight. It's been a great honor and a privilege, really.
No honor, but thank you. It's fun. It's fun. And
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Please do it again. If it was fun, please do it again. We'll be here if we can.
Absolutely.
Ciao.
All the very best. Be well, and thank Barbara from us for loaning you to us tonight. It's been wonderful. It really has.
And remember, sei gesund und dank mach. Be healthy and go with thanks.
And,
right?
and Prof, seid gesund and bleibt gesund. And
Amen.
Seid gesund is goodbye, and be well. Bleibt gesund, be well.
And I say, be well and be thankful.
Absolutely.
Dank mach.
Amen.
All the very best.
Right.
Colter, thank you so much.
My pleasure.